And so we need.
Driven by custodian Harry.
Yes, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome at Transport Forum, 5th of December 2019. We're going to talk all about future mobility for South Africa. We've got a very nice lineup of presenters, executives that's going to share their vision for future mobility in South Africa. And that's the brief actually we gave our presenters today. We said to them we're going to keep it open. Come and talk to us about your vision for mobility in South Africa in the future. And so it can be a personal view, it can be a view from your company or both, but they're going to talk to us about that, and that's going to be great. You can obviously follow the program. Just briefly, we've got Isham Emerin, he's from Praza. We've got Vuisile Majola, who's from Santaku. And I want to inform you now that we have to swap Vuji Majola and Boindelo Lehoni. We had to swap them around. I've been informed just now before this event because of a lot of taxi ranks been closed by the MEC. And so Vuji phoned me this morning. She said to me, crisis. She need to go and do some management. She will join us later on today. So we decided to swap the two presentations then. We have Prof. Jackie Walters, he's from UJ and also a strategic advisor to SABOA, South African Bus Operators Association. Mr. Jack van der Merwe, CEO from the Gautrain Management Agency. Renewal Stander from the joint CEO of ComAir. Obviously ComAir is, it's Kulula and British Airways. We've got Nduduzo Nyana, that's from Uber South Africa, is the country manager, is going to present. And then Boindelo Leone from City of Cape Town. We really appreciate all these presenters. Let's give them a nice hand for sharing, coming today. You notice that the event is for free, so all attendance at our events are for free, and obviously the related content on the web is for free as well. So we have valued sponsors that's actually making this possible. Today, we have the venue sponsor, Praza, that's actually making this possible. Apologies for changing the venue. We first were supposed to be in Jansie House in Johannesburg. They changed it to this venue, but now they've spoiled us, so hopefully in future we can use more of the venues. We've got Paxi. It's actually part of Pep Stores. They a very good solution in terms of courier services amongst their distribution network, that you can use their services now to actually get your goods distributed across the country to the different sites. Very nice product, and obviously you can get all this information from our website, the links for all these logos on the website. Kulula, Paxi is a new gold sponsor, it's their second month now. Kulula is their second year of being a gold sponsor with the Transport Forum. And Renewal will tell you later on more about ComAir and Kulula. Then we've got Global Trade Solutions, all about imports and export. Louise Widget and her team, it's their first year being a gold sponsor. We've got the Open Learning Group. Is there one of the Open Learning Group people that want to come and say a few words perhaps? Nobody here that want to say another year. Obviously Training Solutions, education and training. We've got Oricon. Phil, maybe you guys want to say a few words? Where's Phil? Not on this stage. Thank you, Phil. Maybe Phil, if you can just stand up. Maybe you can see Phil Hendricks. He's from Oricon. They're a valued gold sponsor for 3 years already with the Transport Forum. We've got Freight and Trading Weekly. It's part of the Now Media Group. Ladies and gents, if you've not been subscribed to that magazine yet, you're missing out on Freight and Logistics News. C-Track. Where's the C-Track guys? You want to say a few words? Nobody from C-Track? All right. The C-Track has been the gold sponsor actually from the start of this Transport Forum. And it's all about making your inventory and your assets visible. Fleet management solutions, visibility. Railways Africa magazine, rail infrastructure, Philippa. She's already gold sponsor for about 2 years. We've got VIX technology. I'm quite sure Chart want to say a few words about VIX. Where's Chart? Come and say a few words.
Cheers. Good morning, everybody. I'm Chart Kruger, CEO from VIX South Africa. Just a brief history of who we are. We play in the space of public transport, specializing really in AFC, automated fare collection systems. Just to give you an idea of where we play, the mandates that we do have where our systems run really successfully is in my city down in Cape Town. We've got the Go Durban project on the BRT side and Arieng as well in Swane. We also look after the traditional bus services, so our machines and systems run on there as well. We look after monitoring of subsidies. We've been mandated by the Provincial Department of Transport of Limpopo, where we monitor subsidies, which is running quite successfully across 22 operations. So that's kind of good 450 buses, phased for another 450 buses. And recently appointed to look after the maintenance of ASC equipment on the Gautrain system as well. So I'm going to let the rest of the people who's prepared do the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, VIX, for being a gold sponsor with us. We really appreciate that. The next one is WITS, Transnet Center of Systems Engineering, is WITS University. They've been a gold sponsor now for about 4 years. A lot of engineers working there, systems engineers, system thinking, innovative people. And then we've got University of Johannesburg, Prof. Jackie. I don't know if you want to say a few words. Not on this stage. Prof. Jackie has actually been instrumental to this Transport Forum since the start. So Prof. Jackie, thank you for your continued support all these years and also acting as a mentor for myself. So let's give all the sponsors a great hand. Ladies and gents, yes, the presentations today you will see will be uploaded to the Transport Forum's website for you. You'll be able to download it from there. It's all complimentary. It's that website. Those of you who don't know this yet, we'll go through it quickly. So you need to sign in. There's a user login. Should you not have an account yet, then on the web you will click on the sign up. Little sign up option to the left of your screen. It'll take you through a little simple process to sign up, create your own complimentary account. Once you've done that, you can type in your self-created username and password, and the system will log you in. Why are we doing that? So that I have your information, so that I can spam you again. That's the deal. Thank you very much for allowing me in your inbox again. Then you go to downloads, and when you click on downloads, then you'll have a little search engine. This little search engine, you will then either type in a person's name there in the search field, or you'll type in a date. Say, for example, you'll type in there Walters. The system will give you all the presentations presented by the person Walters over the past 12.5 years. So it's quite a powerful knowledge base. Or a topic, logistics, will give you, everything with logistics in the title of the presentation. Or you can click at category, and it'll give you a pull-down list, and you can select today's date, and it'll bring up all the presentations presented at the event today. So that's the downloads. And as I said, it will be uploaded before noon tomorrow. We invite you to subscribe to the Transport Forum's business directory. The business directory is growing quite nice. We outsourced it to Bontley consultants, Olga Mashilo. She just informed me this morning she's not well. She was planning to be here, but yeah, so they're handling the business directory for us. It's only 450 rands a year to get your company listed in this business directory. So on our website, you will get the information there. You can pop me an email, and I'll connect you with Olga to get your company listed. The feedback form you will have today at the rear of the feedback form, there's also a block where you can tick off if you're interested in getting listed on the business directory. So,
condition that we use public transport to come to this venue. But colleagues, thank you very much. I've been asked to speak on future mobility. And as Harry indicated, the brief was quite wide. I could speak on a personal level, on a company level, and just share my views. I gave it some thought, and I think I would speak from a passenger rail perspective. I think that would be ideal for me to do so. I do, though, want to add that this presentation is focused on the future. So I'm not going to be presenting on the current challenges that we are facing at PRASA. We do have a turnaround plan that is addressing those challenges over the next 12 to 18 months. And that will be a whole presentation on its own. So this one is a more forward-looking presentation on passenger rail. I'm sure the other presenters will deal with some of the other future mobility technologies, be it the flying taxi, Hyperloop, autonomous vehicles, private vehicles, but I'm going to stick to rail in this presentation in terms of the work that we are doing. I've broken the presentation into three. I'm going to start off by looking at some of the global trends that are having an impact on future mobility, then share with you PRASA's modernization plans, and that is really laying the foundation for the future of passenger rail in South Africa. Thereafter, we'll look at some of the expansion plans that we have at PRASA and some of the technologies that we can explore going forward. Global trends, and I think this is already widely discussed, widely known by many of the transport experts in the room, but urbanization, we're fully aware of this, progressing at breakneck speed. Predictions are that by 2030, 2050, 2 out of 3 people will be living in urban centers in your cities. And with that, it's likely that we will see a growth in the middle class sector, which is also a good thing. But if things continue the way it is going, we'll see then also an increase in private car usage. And further estimates is that by 2025, there'll be up to 6 billion trips made by private vehicles, daily trips. That's across the world. So we need to look at having also sustainable solutions in dealing with these demands that we will be faced with. And it's for that reason that we find that there is this rail revival across the world in terms of rail expansion projects happening, modernization of the rail systems, and new technologies in the rail space. And that is because rail does offer significant benefits, not only from a capacity point of view, but also in terms of the impact on the environment, in terms of CO2 emissions, but also just the impact in terms of the land take. It has a much lower land take than any other mode that we are looking at. And then also it can bring down the reliance on the private car as well as on fuel reliance. Working with the cities across the country, and I know many cities are represented here today, we have confirmed in many of the integrated transport plans that rail, in fact, forms the backbone of these transport systems. With this urbanization, we're going to see the growth and the development of mega cities, and we see this happening throughout the world. I think a good example over time will be Gauteng as a global city region, becoming a mega city. And this is going to place added stress on our already constrained city systems that we have. Increased likelihood of informal development, and in fact, I think on the previous slide I showed that photograph of where you see the divide, the inequality. And if this is not managed properly, you're going to have the urban sprawl, the informal development springing up if it's not managed correctly. And we need to respond by having sustainable solutions. And from a transport point of view, rail certainly, together with other modes in an integrated fashion, can be the sustainable solution. Another trend is on the energy and resource side. Certainly, we will all agree that around the world, there's an over-reliance on fossil fuel. And that, as you know, is non-renewable. There's a lot of work being done in terms of clean energy, looking at what we can do. And we've seen now a steady increase in electric vehicles. In fact, walking into the office this morning, I saw a vehicle parked in the parking lot, one of the companies with a fully electric vehicle. So there has been a steady increase in terms of electric vehicles. But as you know, rail already has been in the space for many years, for decades. And the advantages that it brings in terms of the energy efficiency, particularly from a capacity point of view when we're speaking rail. And when we're looking at some of the new technologies that are being developed, be it your LNG or your hydrogen power, it does offer opportunities in the future that could lower the cost of transportation. Hydrogen, I think in particular, there's been quite a bit of development in the rail space in terms of hydrogen trains, or Hydrail as it's being known. Quite a few have been launched already in Europe and America. And this certainly has got potential, even in South Africa, particularly in our rural areas, where we find that many of our lines in the rural environment are not electrified, or even those that are electrified, there are plans to de-electrify them. And so there could be other alternative energy sources that could power some of these trains in these areas. I think an important one, though, is this passenger mobility transformation that we're seeing happening. And if we don't have transport companies or operators responding to this, we're going to be left behind. The issue of smart mobility, mobility as a service, I know one of the previous transport forums touched on this in quite a bit of detail already, but there is this need from the commuter, from the passenger, from the public, to make commuting as easy as possible. They want to have information on their fingertips. They want certainty, reliable information. And we've seen a growth in other sectors that have already made advances when it comes to, I think Uber is going to be presenting later. We've seen advances in some of these spaces. So certainly operators need to take this into account. We need to make sure that we've got integrated and intermodal transport solutions. Rail, as an example, is not a door-to-door mode. It has to be part of a bigger integrated system for it to be effective. And then certainly we all know the issue of big data, the Internet of Things. We need to be in that space. We need to have the systems that can operate these things. Climate change, another trend that will have an impact certainly going forward. We already see the changes in temperatures. I just saw the news yesterday, one of the programs indicating that the last decade has been the warmest decade on Earth. So temperatures have been increasing. We've seen more intense storms. And these are photographs from KZN, by the way. This is not from somewhere else. This is here in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal, where we've been impacted by recent storms, washaways of certain parts of the tracks. You can see the mudslides that have happened and the flooding of our railway corridors. And we need to make sure that going forward, we build resilience into our systems. So they're not only through the design and build process, but also we have to rebuild some of these networks. If we take Cape Town, we take Durban, even Port Elizabeth, to some extent, some of our corridors are on the coast. And we know the issue of sea level rise. I mean, I know there's a study done in Cape Town already that we could have a situation in the next 2 to 3 decades on one of the lines that's on the coast. So these are things that we need to take into account. We need to make sure that when it does happen, we can also respond very quickly, and that it doesn't take us 2 or 3 months before we can launch the service again. So this is quite critical in terms of making sure that the system is resilient. I'm going to share with you now some of our modernization plans, and this is the exciting thing that's happening in rail. And I thought it's important to share it with the broader public, because I think if you just read the newspapers today, it's pretty much doom and gloom. And yes, I think we need to acknowledge that rail at the moment is sitting in a very difficult situation. We are not operating at the levels we should be operating. There are huge challenges, but there are certainly plans ahead to take us through in terms of reviving the rail system in South Africa, the PRASA network. So looking at modernization, we are looking at a complete overhaul of the rail system, and I'm talking about the PRASA rail system. We have envisaged investing approximately 170 billion rand over a 10-year period, and that has already started. That is not a plan. This has already commenced in 2013, 2014. So many of these projects are already up and running. But with a project of this nature or program of this nature, it brings its own challenges, not only by the scale and the size, but also integrating all of these elements, the program management of it. So it would have been ideal if you were modernizing one or two elements at a go. Here, PRASA is modernizing and overhauling the entire system. So that in its own presents challenges as well. So many of you are familiar about the new trains. So we have procured new trains for PRASA. We are also upgrading our rail infrastructure, your Perway, your OHDE, the overhead power, upgrading all of our depots to deal with the new trains that we are receiving, station programs, replacing our signaling system, ICT, also looking at new technology systems that we are bringing in. And very importantly, it's not only an infrastructure approach. We're also looking at the issue of operations. How do we move into the space of providing operations at world-class standards? And I think that is critical. It's not only about the infrastructure. And then very important in our environment is the issue of security that we are addressing. So starting with the new trains, these are the trains that we have procured. We are procuring 3,600 coaches. That equates to 600 six-car train sets. It comes with capacity improvements based on the old train in terms of the number of passengers that it can accommodate. It's faster trains. These trains can go up to 140 kilometers if it's geared properly, but we're looking at 120 kilometers per hour operations on certain of the corridors. It's got better acceleration, better braking. It's designed for 40 years in terms of the design life. And very important, if we want to also ensure that we attract people out of their motor vehicles, because yes, one thing is to make sure we provide a decent and a proper service for our captive users, but we also want to attract choice users like yourselves. And to get you out of your motor vehicles, those that are driving private cars, we need to make sure that you've got a seat, the train is air conditioned, it's cool in summer, it's got the necessary heating in winter, it's got the necessary information, displayed real-time information. On some of the express services will have the Wi-Fi in the trains as well. And also the new trains will in terms of crashworthy, and obviously that's not something that we want to see happen, but it was designed in terms of taking some of these impacts. You will see from the interior of the train, we've got the open gangways, which is very important in our environment. Not only does it offer improved capacity, but also from a security point of view. If something were to happen in one of the coaches, you could very easily access another coach or get security from the one coach to the next coach. So in a six-car train, you can walk from the one end to the other end. And I think that is quite critical, together with having the CCTV and that technology in the train. And these trains are in operation. We're not only talking about it. These trains are running as we speak. It's running on the corridor just behind us, behind this building. That's the Mamelodi corridor. And the feedback has been very positive. Just from an on-time performance point of view, we've improved drastically because of the new trains and the infrastructure upgrades that we have done. Passenger numbers have increased significantly. And very importantly, passenger satisfaction levels is also sitting quite high. If you get on the train, you can just feel there's a lot more happiness from your customers sitting on the trains. And I think that's quite positive. So if any of you get the opportunity, please, it's just behind the building. At any point in time, jump on the train. I'm going to just check with my colleagues. We're not running the evening peak yet, or are we running evening peak service? Okay, because we were running the morning and the afternoon. It seems like we're running the evening peak as well. So it's a full day service that we are running on the corridor behind us. We also built a new factory. This is a manufacturing plant where the new trains are being built. These trains are not being bought overseas and being shipped from somewhere else. Yes, the first 20 trains we did get from Brazil. That was so that we could test the trains. But the remaining 580 trains are being built in this factory in Nigel. The manufacturing already commenced in the beginning of last year, and to date we've received 8 trains from the factory. Very importantly is that out of the 930 staff that we have got working in the factory, 90% are local citizens. So I think that that's quite important. And together with this factory that we have built, we're also looking at a supplier park being constructed adjacent to this facility. And this will certainly assist with ensuring that South Africa becomes the manufacturing rail hub for the continent, as was agreed with the SADC countries already. Moving on, because I think I might be running out of time, there's the depot modernization. We are upgrading our depots across the country. Already we upgraded Wilmerton here in Gauteng. It's been expanded further, but certainly the rest of our depots across the country will also be upgraded so that we can maintain and service the new trains. And also not to forget about the old yellow and grey trains, because the last train will only leave our network in the early 2030s. Signalling renewal. We have replaced our entire signalling systems. Before we started this program, only 14% of our signalling system had not reached the end of its lifespan. So when anything went wrong with the signalling system, it was a huge challenge. The technology was already obsolete. Just getting spare parts or even finding people that could work on these systems was a challenge. So we are replacing the entire system. These programs have been up and running. Already in Cape Town and here in Gauteng, the projects are more than 80% complete, where we have replaced the entire interlocking systems. We've also constructed new train control centers. And those photographs at the bottom of the train control centers. The big photograph is of the one in Kalfontein, state-of-the-art train control center. Again, many of you may have visited this facility already. And then we've got the one in Bellville in Cape Town. This project has experienced some challenges, and I think as with many of the mega projects in the country, the issue of theft and vandalism on the projects, also the concerns when it comes to the business forums in the areas that have created some challenges that we need to address when rolling out these projects. Very quickly, our Perway, certainly we are looking at upgrading where we can so that we can achieve higher speeds on our networks, replacing some of the turnouts, looking at where we've got speed restrictions, temporary speed restrictions, so that we can reduce them, remove them from the system. Sometimes it's drainage related, could be maintenance related, and also where possible to realign some of the track where we've got tight curvature and so forth. Station modernization. We are upgrading key stations across the country, not only from a station building look and feel, but even from the issue of the speed gates that we are rolling out, electronic information displays, PA systems, CCTV, and working very closely with the planning authorities in terms of the intermodal facilities, as well as the feed and distribution services to these stations. Where there are opportunities for commercial development, it's something that we are also pursuing at some of our key stations. As I've mentioned, it's not just about infrastructure. The issue of operations is critical. Very important is the issue of travel time on our system. How can we improve travel time on the railway? So yes, we're getting faster trains, but also very importantly, running different types of services, your inner and outer or express services that we are looking at, running at higher frequency, and also a more user-friendly timetable for the commuters. In order to ensure that we do have the seamless integration between rail and other modes of transport, certainly something that we need to make more progress on is the issue of ticketing. Yes, from the planning authorities, they will be driving integrated ticketing, but from a PRASA level, the issue of automated fare collection. And we do have some plans in place that we want to start rolling this out. That phase one already, hopefully towards the end of next year, we'll have some partial automation in our system. Moving towards 2022, we will have full automation with a system that is fully interoperable with other modes of transport. So moving quickly on to rail expansion, and as I've mentioned earlier, we've worked closely with planning authorities in terms of the transport plans across the country. And as I've mentioned, in all instances, rail is confirmed in the plans as the backbone of the public transport system. It is acknowledged. We need to see how do we enhance that role. So whether we look at Tshwane, here where we are sitting today, we've got the plans in terms of how we want to expand the rail network. So whether it's a reintroduction of the Hammanskraal rail service, whether it's a Mabopane to Winterveld, Babalegi new corridor, these are things that we have got on the plans to make sure we can protect it as in terms of future corridors that we need to roll out. In the case of Cape Town, similar situation, we've identified future corridors And we've got this map for every city in the country. And it's part of an integrated plan. It's not something where PRASA sits in its corner and develops this. This is done in conjunction with the city, with the planning authorities. Technology choice framework is very important because PRASA, as you find it today, basically it's a heavy rail network that we operate. But certainly there are other technologies that, again, together with the cities we are exploring, be it light rail, be it the tram, be it high-speed rail that we need to look at in terms of where it is appropriate to roll out some of these modes. And LRT, I think, particularly has got some potential in some of the cities to roll out in the future as a future option. And we've seen the impact it is have in some of the cities around the world. I think the cities that have maintained the old tram systems, particularly in Europe, are far better off today because they've maintained those trams. And the sad thing is we had trams in South Africa. And I've listed all the cities that had trams, from Johannesburg down to Pietermaritzburg. And many of them were stopped in the 1940s, but we had the tram systems. In fact, here in Tshwane, you can still see some of the old infrastructure from the trams. And this made way for the private car. And we find ourselves today struggling with congestion in some of the cities. So I think if we had kept some of those things, we would have been a lot better off in terms of modernizing them, but we can still reintroduce some of these things. There's certainly opportunities to look at that, and we've identified that with some of the cities already. Tshwane, Durban, Cape Town, there's certainly opportunities to look at light rail and tram. Very quickly, and I'm running out of time, is on the long distance rail, there's opportunity to run faster trains. I'm not talking high speed, faster trains on the existing narrow gauge network that we have got to compete with your road-based long distance transport. There are opportunities, it can be done. We across the world, and even here in South Africa, there was a train that ran between Pretoria and Johannesburg, the Metro Blitz. It ran at 160 kilometers an hour. This was in the 1980s. So we need to make sure that the safety, the maintenance, you need to have that in place to do some of these things. But this is something we need to move towards. I think even the president mentioned it in his speech recently. He called it the bullet train. But certainly high-speed rail is something that is required in the future if we want to have a long-distance, an intercity rail system that is functioning, I think, sustainably. But to have this in operation, you do need fairly high volumes. It's not something you can put in place with low volumes. You need approximately 1,000 passengers per hour to be operating on the system. And it also operates in a certain situation where it's quite attractive. And that is typically when you're operating between 300 and 1,000 kilometers from a distance point of view. A journey time of approximately 4 hours. Once you go beyond that, you find it becomes a lot more difficult to compete with your airlines. Because high-speed rail competes with airlines and private car. That is your competitors in the space. So certainly from, in terms of Durban to Joburg, just from a distance point of view, even the demand, certainly it's seen as a bit of a higher priority. I'm not quite sure where this smart city is, the new smart city will be that the president alluded to. I think a lot of work needs to be around that. But certainly these are things that will come into the mix in terms of connecting these cities that we need to look at. Cape Town, Johannesburg is it's quite long, 1,500 kilometers. But if you start looking at key towns along the route, be it Bloemfontein, Kimberley, you start looking at this corridor differently in terms of how you can roll it out. And I'm going to conclude on this, Harry. This is my last slide. I think I went through it very quickly in terms of what are some of the global trends. But I think looking into the future, I'm certainly of the view that there's no doubt that rail will continue to play an important role as part of an integrated intermodal transport system. And I'm talking here about the steel-on-steel rail. Okay, I know some people don't see Hyperloop as rail. It's seen as another form of transport. But certainly rail as we know it certainly will have an important role to play. But it's critical that the rail system is safe, that the system is reliable, frequent, seamless in terms of the way it integrates with other modes, and also that it provides competitive journey times with other modes of transport. I touch on the issue of this passenger transformation, mobility transformation. Companies need to become customer-centric or become more customer-centric. We need to respond to the way customers want to access transport, the issue of mobility as a service. Yes, the rail is never going to be there at the touch of a button and the train pulls up at your front door. But if we've got the right frequencies, the right service that we are, and is properly integrated, it will play that role. And it's already been shown to play that role elsewhere in the world as part of that. If you're looking at the issue of urbanization, the growth that we are talking about, you need these capacity modes. And then the issue of the digital transformation, we need to have that. It would have been nice if anybody walking into our building, the first thing you would have seen, a couple of these big screens in our reception, showing you exactly how the company is performing, our services, where there are delays, social media. These are the things we need to start doing, how we can interact better with the environment out there. Very important, we have to forge new relationships with the transport role players, be it operators, be it the people in the data space. We need to have these relationships so that it can be part of an holistic provision of information, but also the end-to-end journey that we need to look at. From a technology point of view, I've mentioned LRT. I think it's certainly got a role in South Africa. Also in terms of revitalizing the inner cities and some of the city precincts. It plays a huge role in terms of doing that. High-speed rail, I've touched on that. And then finally, I do believe going forward, again in the rural areas, the issue of hydrogen-powered trains is something that we can certainly explore. It has a potential, particularly when we talk about heavy vehicles, where you can bring the cost down in terms of hydrogen fuel cells. And particularly in the rural areas where we are finding a lot. There's a lot of requests coming through to whether it's the Department of Transport, PRASA, requests to look at rail services in the rural environments. And obviously you don't operate it the same as you operate a metro service. It's a different design that you will have. But certainly this is one, I think, technology one could explore in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Imran. Surely very interesting presentation. We're looking forward to the vision. Right, our next presenter, as I told you, we're going to swap two presentations around. So our next presenter then is Mr. Wendelo Lehoni. He's from the city of Cape Town. He's going to talk to us about technology-driven, fit-for-purpose future urban transport solutions. Thank you very much, Bjorn, for traveling all the way to come and share your vision with us. Thank you very much.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, all right. And I like to walk around. So, in the city of Cape Town, we and across cities, in cities across South Africa, we gather passenger information in terms of the minibus taxi operations. And mostly, that information is collected for regulations purposes, to decide how many taxi permits or operating licenses should be issued on a route, and which routes are viable in terms of passenger demand, etc. Now, traditionally, we collect that data via physical manual surveys. Somebody sits on a street corner and counts the taxis going past, and they also count occupancy. And just a little anecdote, when I asked these guys, how do you make a call when that taxi flies by you, between 16 people in a taxi or 8 people in a taxi? They said, no, we actually look at the light shining through the windows, and that gives us an idea of the occupancy of the vehicle. So that was quite interesting to me. In any case, we've over the years discovered that when we do these surveys, we get a view of what the situation is at the public transport interchange for 2 days in the year. Because you just cannot do it more efficiently with the resources you have available. So we started looking at technological ways to actually gather the data. And then we started looking, okay, so why are we collecting this data? Surely it's not just in order to regulate the industry. And looking at it, you discover that the reason why we actually do this is to match supply and demand, to make sure that our captive users, who don't really have a choice in terms of the mode of transport they use, to make sure that they get the most efficient service to get them. And in Cape Town we have, and as in other metros, we have long distances that people travel. To make sure that they actually get from point A to point B as fast and as quickly as possible. It is an industry where people have to get up early in the morning to catch a taxi when it's still dark, and the time that they spend on the road is just as fraught with danger as the time they spend getting to a taxi rank. So we're looking at a day in the life of a commuter. It's a very early start. It's a long day. People leave home 4 o'clock in the morning, get home 8 o'clock in the evening every day. And so the City of Cape Town's strategic vision is to make the lives of our commuters a little bit easier, drive down the opportunity cost of using transport, and drive even spatial transformation through actually making changes in transport. So in terms of technology, we realized that in order to gather all this big data that everybody's talking about in a meaningful way that can actually make sense when you analyze it, we had to do a couple of initiatives. So at our public transport interchanges, we then rolled out environmental monitoring to monitor air quality at our public transport interchanges. It's something that's not really important to our citizens and our commuters, but it's actually something that the city should consider. Reducing electricity and water consumption, setting up public Wi-Fi in a way trying to bridge the digital divide, and then to set up my city station Wi-Fi, which is different from our normal public transport interchanges, installing smart cameras and doing video analytics on that, and then do vehicle access control at our public transport interchanges. So in the background you see Belleville PTI during a normal day, about 14,000 people going through there in the morning peak. And we looked at how can we leverage technology to make people safer inside the rank, make sure that the transport opportunity is there when they need it, and make sure that the experience that they have becomes an improved experience with every intervention that we do. So what we aimed to achieve with this thing was to provide interactive operational dashboards, to have reports with insights into trends and anomalies, trigger notifications based on thresholds, etc., and to compare data across Internet of Things initiatives, seeking out insights that would show us correlations between disparate data collections. Now, these things are not something, on these data points that we collect, are not something that really interest our user, but it does impact him. And the city has been planning public transport and implementing public transport with a very limited view of the reality out there. And what we've done with these technologies is to actually get a very clear view of what's happening at each of our public transport interchanges. Outcomes, to make sure that the rank can cater for the volumes of commuters, that the commuters spend as little time as possible waiting for taxis, and that there's always enough supply for the demand. In Cape Town, there's a big resistance to cloud within the city. So we had to build a business case to actually justify using cloud for these initiatives. So through cloud, we get real-time data monitoring because you don't have the issue of getting through the city's stringent security in order to actually look at the data. We have serious cost savings, real and good reactivity because of real-time decision making, and then service improvements. So this is some of the data that is starting to come through. This looks at devices and how they travel between the PTIs, public transport interchanges, that are currently connected to the system. So perhaps I should just explain a little bit more about how we do this. We install public Wi-Fi. Through the public Wi-Fi, we start picking up your phone when it enters the interchange precinct. You can use the public Wi-Fi, and through that you then associate with the network, and we then know that that address belongs to a specific phone, and then we monitor your phone. But you can also choose not to associate with our network, but because your phone is still emitting a signal, we can still monitor you while you're on the within the range of our public Wi-Fi. We have data points that we collect via our environmental sensors, and then we have CCTV, which obviously is being monitored in terms of safety. But the CCTV infrastructure can also be used to leverage serious data. And then we have access control with number plate recognition cameras and radio frequency ID tags attached to that. And that is being used to monitor the vehicles entering the public transport interchange precinct and leaving it. Okay, so that diagram over there shows you just a little snapshot of devices, phones, moving from one interchange to another, moving from which is plain taxi rank at the bottom, and moving to Cape Town Station Deck at the top, and there's quite a bit of movement between that, and you can see that there's a lot of integrated movement between the various routes in the city. It also gives us daily visitors at the rank, and you can see that on a Friday the numbers are quite higher than the rest of the week. It also gives us trends for time of day visitors, and so our peak starts quite early at about 5 o'clock, and then it grows through the day, and then it tapers down again. Interesting, the one thing that we picked up at our Mitchell's Plain rank, for instance, was that, and it's something we never realized because our physical surveyors normally reported for duty at the rank at 6 o'clock. We actually have a peak at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then it tapers down, and then we have a second peak at 6, and which then runs through towards to about 8 o'clock. And so the city didn't know about the peak, but the industry that provides the service at that time actually knew about the peak. And that was quite a valuable insight to us. And so you can look at everyday at the PTI and look at how many visitors you had for that specific day, etc. By the way, Black Friday, what was it, 29th of November, was off the chart in terms of visitors to our PTIs. So it wasn't only a congested space in the roads infrastructure. Okay. So this is data usage by week, and here we see what the amount of data that is being used by our people. We can also drill down into it, so we can actually get to the point of actually seeing which sites the people are visiting while they're connected to our system. By the way, you do sign off a disclaimer in terms of that privacy when you log onto our system. But it's mostly WhatsApp, it's Facebook, it's the normal social media channels. But we also have quite a bit of Google Scholar visits, which I'm very chuffed about, because it does mean that some of our students are using the connectivity to actually do some decent research, which I think is quite cool. Okay, this is by manufacturer. Mitchell's Plains people are, there's a big market for Samsung there. That's the Samsung crowd. Apple, less so. It would be interesting to, and Huawei, Tommy, you have a market challenge out there. And so on. And then this is number of visitors by manufacturer. So that's data usage, and that's number of visitors. Because you will find that not all types of devices use the same amount of data. So Samsung could, for instance, have a large number of visitors, but the data consumed by the users are not as big as other users. Okay. So this is a Wi-Fi dashboard for a specific campus. In this case, Station Deck, Cape Town Station Deck, just on top of the Praza station. And if you look at that table over here, you'll see the visitors going from Station Deck to Jogabi. And then you'll see Station Deck to Mitchell's Plain. And in Mitchell's Plain, we have 3 ranks. So it shows you the guys going to the various ranks at Mitchell's Plain. That chart shows you how many people are in every zone at Station Deck. So for those of you who don't know, at a taxi rank, you have lanes or zones for every destination. So the Kensington Association will have a lane. They load their people there, and they take them to Kensington Factorton. Belta, which is the Belleville Taxi Association, loads people, and they take them to Belleville. But they all have a lane, and it's part of the way these things are designed to minimize conflict between the various taxi associations where there is competition for passengers. So this chart shows us the number of visitors per lane, and because the lane is attached to a destination, it shows you the number of visitors per destination to the public transport interchange. That's a heat map. It shows you where the biggest concentration of people are. That one, no, actually, it's the trains burning underneath the deck. That heat map over there is because there's a ticket office in that last row. data shows you people who come in on the Belleville line, come in from Belleville onto the Belleville lane in the PTI, and where they go from there on the PTI. So as they move around, we then pick them up as to where their destinations are, so we can determine where they're coming from and where they're going to. That's another view of the same thing. Those dots are all people coming in at the taxi rank. Some of them move over to the Golden Arrow bus station. Some of them move over to the My City station. And some of them move over across the railway line or towards the railway line to the railway station, the Mitchells Plain railway station that sits over here somewhere. Okay. We also track people moving in between stations. Now, that's the Mitchells Plain main rank over there. That's the Mitchells Plain South station over there, or Sevenderlaan as it's known. And no, Vanessa and Obas is not there. And these graphics you see over here actually denotes a specific device and how it moves in between the two taxi ranks on a weekly basis. That specific movement was on the 1st of December, and that's why we highlight it over there. So what happens, people come in from anywhere in the city into the main taxi rank, but the actual destination is serviced by this taxi association over here. So they need to walk from that one across the town center to this one at the bottom to get the taxi that actually services their last mile. And we can also see which ranks are servicing the most passengers, etc. Now, we've had tremendous problems, similar to our Prasa colleagues, with getting fiber infrastructure installed, and once it's installed, to keep it up. Belleville is due to come online within the next few months, and so is Claremont, Wynberg, Grassy Park, Lentegeur. So infrastructure is already installed there, but the fiber connection is not in place, and therefore we cannot pull data from those installations at the moment. Within the next few months, we'll have a much better picture of how these passengers are moving around our city. This just trips coming from Cape Town Station Deck to Jogabi, which is our long distance rank. Stock Road Station is adjacent to that rank. And then they move from Jogabi down to Mitchells Plain rank. When you see the number of trips on this day is much less, and then the number of trips on this day, that was about 290 journeys, if you look at that way. Okay. Now I'm hoping this thing works, but I think my hyperlink is not going to work, so I'm quickly going to exit out of the presentation and then launch that from his desk. Okay. Okay. This video shows actually some video analytics. We identify a person based on facial features, posture, and gait. You see, we assign an identity to every unique individual. And as they enter the taxi, we actually count the number of people getting into the taxi. You will see some numbers do get assigned, but they do not get into the taxi, so they don't get counted. The count is at the top there. Okay. And so all of those numbers that are there right now are not going to get into the taxi, so they don't get counted. but they were identified as individuals, and the taxi then leaves. So, quickly just come back to my presentation. Okay. So now we're collecting a lot of data, something like 140 million records a month. And we obviously had to apply, it's not something that people can sit and look at and analyze manually. So we had to apply some artificial intelligence and some machine learning to actually look at all of these various sources of data from different types of technology, relate them to each other, and then make inferences from there that can inform both the planning of transport as well as the regulation of transport. Okay. So the idea is to make effective decisions based on effective decisions to cause improvements based on customer demand, to get customers to spend less time in queues, and to then spread traffic loads more often, essentially trying to bring down congestion. Just an interesting one, we picked up at Cape Town Station Deck that the dwell time, which is the time a passenger wait until he can get onto a taxi, is about 11 minutes. But at Mitchell's Plain, that dwell time is 3 minutes. And we at first thought it was a supply issue, that there were just not enough vehicles to service the demand. But actually, it's a design issue. Mitchell's Plain had more space. They could make bigger turning circles, bigger, wider lanes. And in that way, the movement of the vehicles on the facility is just much more efficient. Cape Town Station Deck was fit into a space that was available to the city at the time through a PRASA lease. And they had to fit all of those destinations into that small space, which leads to cramped lanes, smaller turning circles, less space for vehicles to accommodate each other. And so the congestion on the deck is actually causing the delay. And it's not a lack of supply that's causing the delay. Okay, okay, and that's just some AI and machine learning principles we use. We've built some models, and the test is going to be when we're starting to change variables through interventions that take place, to test those models to see whether that actually comes up with new predictive analytics and recommendations in terms of service improvements. Okay, what else can we do? We're now looking at gunshot detection. Bellville rank especially is notorious for that. Challenge right now is to integrate the gunshot detection sensors with the camera systems, so that when the shot is detected, that the cameras will focus on that area. Make increased use of artificial intelligence services, and then we're also now looking at fire, heat, light levels, door tampering, and that kind of thing. And a lot of that is about protecting the infrastructure. And so, in conclusion, the city will obviously continue to work to try to make the lives of our citizens better. The question is, how do you do that? And the only way to do that really effectively and efficiently is to have the information at hand. And so what we've started to do is to stop talking about big data and start collecting big data. We first tried to buy it. Was proved to be prohibitive, the cost. And so we started collecting big data, and we focused on public transport because we feel that's where interventions are needed. And it's getting off the ground. Next thing, we'd like to track Prasa trains. And I'm glad to hear that you're looking at ticketing systems, because passenger data, as you can see, this was focused on passenger data. And passenger data on our main public transport backbone is currently a gap. We have the last rail census, and that's it. So city's looking forward to work with all partners in improving the public transport service in the City of Cape Town. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bjorn. We really appreciate your time coming all the way. I had the privilege in spending some time with them on Tuesday at the Transport Management Centre in Cape Town, and it's impressive. Surely a city of lots of innovation. Thank you very much. Ladies and gents, I made a boo-boo on the program, so I must sincerely apologize. Our next presenter, we're going to have Renewal right now to present. She unfortunately can't present later on. I haven't picked up the time slot Pia actually given through to me. So Renewal, sincere apologies, but we're so privileged in having you here. So she wanted to leave. I said to her, no, you can't. We have to have you. So thank you very much for coming. There it is. I've got it right. So now.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really sorry that I'm between you and lunchtime. Unfortunately, I had thought I was on the 12:10 slot, and I have a flight at 4, so I couldn't adapt to the new slot. So I do apologize for that. I want to start off by maybe just sharing a little video with you, and I hope it's going to... There we go.
It's a good sound.
It's an extract from the movie Blade Runner. I don't know who saw that movie. But it's really the movie set in the 1980s, and it provides a depiction of what public transport or what mobility would look like in 2019. I think let's just leave it. We don't have to worry about the sound. It's just more important that we actually get the image. And this is what the movie directors predicted transport would look like in 2019, and it's quite interesting. You'll see vehicles flying through flying through the city, okay. And of course, sorry, it's not very good, is it? I'm going to forget about the videos. I don't think it's going to work. I've got about 4 of them, but I don't think it's going to work. So I'm going to cut my losses and leave it at that. So we've been asked this afternoon to stimulate thinking about future mobility. All I can say is that it's a future that's based on some of the most powerful technologies the world has ever seen.
Is it on a video so you can just kind of talk?
Yeah, I'll just talk, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Because that's not going to work. So I don't know that I'll be able to describe all of these videos, but let's do. So now I don't want to sound like the futurist who back in 1890s used scientific data to say that New York would be abandoned as unfit for habitation by the 1930s. And his argument was based on projections of population growth. He correctly estimated that New York's population would grow from 4 million to more than 7 million in 40 years. It was therefore obvious, according to him, that the number of horses necessary to provide transportation for that many people would result in a public health hazard of incredible proportions. Because there would be horse manure up to the 3rd floor, windows everywhere in Manhattan. Obviously, one can get into trouble by assuming that technology is frozen in time. In 1900, about 120 years ago, the primary means of transport in Johannesburg was wagons drawn by oxen. Today, we might say that the new oxen is the Toyota Quantum. What can we expect by 2100? Futuristic technologies will revolutionize not only how we can get from point A to point B, but also cityscapes, urban planning, land usage, and of course, our health. And I'll come to that a bit later. So, in my opinion, future mobility is complex and it's hard to predict. It is based on how frequently we travel, our incomes, the urban environment, population density, levels of development, and of course, technology adaptation. So future forecasts predict growth in urbanization, more congestion, more pollution. It is estimated that by 2030, 60% of the world's population will live in cities, a 10% increase from today's levels. McKinsey researchers forecasted that automobile sales will increase from 70 million globally to 125 million in that same period. So unless something changes, this would suggest an urban future of pollution, smog, hellish traffic jams, a scene I suppose we're not that unfamiliar with in Johannesburg and Cape Town. Certainly cities like Beijing, Delhi, that struggle with air pollution are even more concerned about the future of urban mobility. So the dark cityscapes of the movie Blade Runner, released in 1982, comes to mind. The movie shows a technologically advanced city with flying cars that is terribly polluted and grungy, a dystopian nightmare. Another movie, Fifth Element, released in 1997, with scenes of a flying car shown with traffic behavior similar to our own roads, except in mid-air. So they had those multiple levels of cars and lots of pollution. Probably the scenes from Mad Max Fury Road, released in 2015, shows an environmentally degraded desertscape where the haggard survivors of an apocalypse drive around in petrol cars that bellow smoke. So which of those scenarios are we anticipating going forward? But digitalization, electrification, shared value business models, automation, short distance flight are revolutionizing the transport systems. Car sharing, for example, has already disrupted the traditional taxi industry through apps like Uber, Taxify, and Lyft. Many countries are turning to bike sharing services like Lime, and I had a lovely picture of a bike sharing service. Both of these innovations increase the usage of each vehicle, lowering the cost of personal mobility by up to 60% relative to private vehicle ownership. Similarly, in-vehicle connectivity trends like Waze are revolutionizing traffic behavior by directing cars away from traffic blockages, alerting drivers to hazards, and using the network effect and data of each car in the network as a node that interacts in unique ways with other nodes in the network. Other countries have digitized transport services by creating apps that allow the public to pay their bus, train, taxi, and bicycle fares in one click, something similar to what we heard about here before. Electrification of cars has been driven by our very own homegrown Elon Musk and will completely change the carbon footprint of the automotive industry. It is 2019, and another frontier for technology in cars has been reached: autonomous driving. This innovation hails the start of the driverless age. More than just allowing a rider more time to read, work, and enjoy a leisurely drive rather than stressful sitting at the wheel, autonomous cars also promise to end unsightly parking lots and, thankfully, parking ticket fees. I'm quite sure that'll be replaced by something else. Neither are cars simply limited to the road. The sky's the limit. Several companies are unveiling their small passenger drones and flying cars. This year, 2019, for the first time, Toyota did not unveil a new car model at the Tokyo Motor Show. Instead, Toyota trialed new types of transport, from electric scooters to flying cars. Ehang, the tech startup, working in partnership with the city of Guangzhou in China, is testing the use of passenger drones for both people and freight transit around the city. Ehang hopes to roll out these drones by 2021. The drones will be serviced by a cluster of docking stations and helipads all across Guangzhou, where passengers will be able to embark and disembark. Is this a brand new form of air industry with a unique business model to present our airlines? Ultimately, the driving factor for transport technology change is time. An ox cart may move at a glacial speed of 4 kilometers per hour, while the modern car is significantly faster at about 120 kilometers per hour on the highway. Why then do most people still spend 2 hours or more in traffic each day? Changes in spatial planning is required. Many cities from London to Tokyo have introduced measures like bicycle superhighways and car-free zones to reduce congestion. Research shows that denser cities are actually greener, more cost-effective, and less impactful on the environment, as people can walk to facilities that are closer. Denser cities also allow for cost-effective public transport infrastructure like subways and commuter trains. For public transport to be economical, high-density, short-distance mobility demands and shared services are required, leveraging economies of scale from high-density populations. Highly nucleated cities have the most urban mobility options due to ample choice and availability of private and public facilities. New technologies will force a change in city infrastructure, like charging posts, smart grids, smart cities. However, plans, as the previous speaker spoke about, plans are in place for a smart city in South Africa. In cities around the world, more emphasis is being placed on multimodal urban mobility, walking, buses, trains, bikes alongside cars. Each form of transport necessitates its own infrastructure environment. For example, pedestrians may require better lighting, street signage, paving, and greenery. Low-density cities like Johannesburg require people to drive longer distances to reach facilities, encouraging more private car ownership. This makes cities less livable for older citizens, poorer or differently abled citizens, and has a greater impact on the environment. Those living outside of the core have less access, are more isolated, have less amenities and employment opportunities. Those who have no access to cars or public transport are even more constrained economically and immobile. South Africa is a good example of poor mobility in a low-density city due to our unique geographical history. Johannesburg shows an exact opposite settlement pattern to cities like London and Tokyo. The pattern is replicated in other cities in South Africa. The effect is that most people are commuting long distances from their homes to places of employment. Low-income families in South Africa can spend between 43% and 60% of their salary on transport alone, according to the Cape Town Committee for Transport and Urban Development. It is wasted time. It negatively impacts the quality of our life. Traffic jams can cost between 2 to 4% of GDP through lost time, wasted fuel, and increased cost of doing business. It contributes to health conditions like stress and anxiety, stress and obesity. Road accident figures in South Africa are amongst the highest in the world. At 1 million road accidents, well, I think this is a bit exaggerated. I don't think it's that many per year. In addition, many commuters are exposed to crime. Mobility impacts health, safety, life, and our most precious resource, time. In conclusion, reconfiguring our urban spaces and transport systems may be an important way to unlock value and improve the quality of life for many. Multimodal mobility systems reduce the impact of congestion, improve quality of life and health, and reduce the impact of traffic on the environment. Pressing space, climate, health, and economic problems mean that the future could be a mad, Maxish desert or an equally dystopian Blade Runner cyber grunge city. Big words there. With the advent of incredible new technologies, we are more than ever before in human history equipped with the means to create wonderful cities that are pleasurable to live, work, travel, and play in. I thank you. I'm happy to take a question or two. I'm sure you were all wanting me to talk about the future of aviation, but I hope I've completely surprised you. I'm happy to take a question or two.
Right, Renewal will take a question or two. Is there a question for Renewal?
Yes, please.
Mike Kreiner. Renewal, I'm sure there must be at one or more of metros in the country position for you, because what you've shared with us was very insightful and visionary and realistic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Question for Renewal?
Excuse me. Renewal, I don't think it's necessarily the case that there are fewer than 1 million road accidents in a year. Some that may be very minor, but we do kill 14,000 a year. So if we take serious injuries, that may be up to 50,000. So the 1 million accidents doesn't seem all that great. Let's hope that, I understand that the Traffic Law Review Enforcement Review Committee has just reported. Let's hope that they will be able to bring something to bear on that on those statistics.
Good. So the million accidents is correct. I was thinking of the deaths, yeah. So yeah, yeah, and the million pranks, yeah, yeah.
Another question? Everybody happy?
Good. So then that was easy. So I didn't take too much of your lunchtime then. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Renewal. It was definitely worth our while waiting for her, and what an excellent airline, Comair. We can surely give them a hand. The Transport Forum flies Comair. Thank you very much. Right, let me just do my little calculations here now for our lunch. I'm going to have lunch now, and I see it's now 1 o'clock. So I see you here back again at 1:45. All right, 1:45. Thank you very much.
Driven by custodian Harry van Heestien, the Transport Forum has grown from strength to strength since 2006. Throughout this time, it has maintained the aim of being an industry leader in collaboration, networking, and connecting industry leaders.
Our department's involvement in the Transport Forum began more than 10 years ago when we were invited to establish the Transport Forum. And from the beginning, it was very evident that there's a need for information dissemination to the transport and supply chain industry in South Africa. We are right at the beginning, we had 8 or 9 people attending sessions. Today we have more than 150 people attending sessions. The topics that we choose to present in the forum depends on burning issues within the industry, trends, developments, legislative changes, and so on. And we invite leading speakers to share their experiences and information with our audiences in South Africa. One of our other benefits is also that the audience could ask questions, very interactive in nature, and I think it benefits really not only our department, the university, but also our students, as well as the members of the industry attending these sessions.
The Transport Forum became the preferred platform in South Africa to discuss all issues relating to transport, providing insight into policy direction and allowing businesses to stay informed on new and upcoming industry developments. Thought leaders are given a monthly platform through the Transport Forum to engage with industries to debate matters of relevance and share knowledge and ideas. Role players included in the monthly special interest group sessions are all levels of government, state-owned enterprises, private business, industry management, regulatory bodies, research and academic institutions, as well as ICT solution providers.
In our industry, being able to make informed decisions is really, really important. So being in the frame of the latest information and understanding the latest market trends are really important to understanding the derived demand of shipping and logistics. With that in mind, the Transport Forum has been a valuable factor for our industry in terms of making informed decisions, and we look forward to attending and being a part of the future events as well.
My engagement with the Transport Forum is a great one. I think it's a game changer from our perspective. In terms of the networking that the Transport Forum has brought to us, it's been brilliant. In terms of the presentations, the content, the information that's been shared, it's never dull. It's delivered by professionals with plenty years of experience. So forever, when you're attending one of these Transport Forums events, it is a learning opportunity.
Collaboration and communication between these various stakeholders brings out superior solutions to create a more efficient and competitive transport sector.
But I guess the biggest benefit that we really get is the benefit that we get from Harry. Harry is passionate about transport in all its spheres, and he's a man that is really connected. So if I want an introduction to anybody, he really does make it happen. He's passionate about my business. And what makes it really important to understand is that he actually cares.
So with the information that one gets from the Transport Forum, you are able to share with those who do not have the opportunity to come and attend such forums. So in that regard, we do appreciate the sponsors, all the major sponsors that enable us small businesses to come and attend and get information with regard to all the opportunities that are available and what is planned through the transport and logistics sectors.
And I think many people in the transport industry who really care about transport and want to be in transport, whatever the case may be, and trade and various other subsectors of this, like road funding and so on, are part and parcel of the Transport Forum. It's a very broad thing, but it is focused on transport, and it is great for anybody who has a slightest interest in transport.
And I have really respected the way Harry works. I think the platform is organized in a very professional way and very interactive.
I have worked with Harry for I think the last 10 years in the Transport Forum. MCLI partnered with them, with the Transport Forum for many years for fantastic events down in Nelspruit. And I have really valued the chance to meet with people in the industry, and also it has been an incredible networking opportunity for me, both in my previous career and now launching my new business. It's a really important platform, I think, and there isn't another one quite like it in the country.
As the country as a whole, we need to know what is happening. We need to adjust. We need change management to take place. And this kind of forums makes the whole industry, the whole stakeholders of the industry to know what is happening in the world, what is happening. We need to adjust.
The Department of Transport and Supply Chain Management at the University of Johannesburg regards the Transport Forum as a vital link to industry for academia. It is a forum where industry experts discuss issues that are pertinent to the various subsectors within the industry, and this provides a platform for our students to be engaged with the industry activities and for academia to present their research findings to industry to inform practice and policy.
The Transport Forum invites you to join the special interest groups to engage and promote your business today using live streaming and in face-to-face networking. We further encourage you to promote your business through the Transport Forum Business Directory at a minimal annual fee where you will reach industry role players.
Good afternoon, ladies and gents. It's still the 5th of December 2019, and we're talking future mobility in South Africa. So we're going to commence this afternoon with Mr. Jack van der Merwe. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Gautrain Management Agency, and is obviously also involved in strategic planning for the province as a whole. So Jack, thank you very much. He's flown in from overseas this morning, so he's definitely exhausted, but still he came to share his vision with us. Jack, thank you very much for always supporting us.
Thank you very much, Harry. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to me. We have a crisis. South Africa has a crisis. So I can't talk to you about future mobility if I don't talk to you about the crisis. Because if I don't, and if you don't do something about the crisis, mobility is not an issue. So what is the crisis? This is the crisis. We have 38.4 million people in our labor force between the age of 16 and 64. They didn't count me because I'm out of that. We have 16.3 million people employed. We have 6.7 million people unemployed. We have 2.7 million people that have given up looking for a job. And we have 12.8 million people which isn't in the labor market. So we have 10 million people running at the side of us waiting for employment. So if we talk about mobility, if we talk about anything, you always have to keep in mind how do we move that 10 million people back into the labor force. As you know, we have even a greater problem. SATS SA says that 55.2% of our youth are unemployed. And what is quite interesting if we look at transport is that overseas, the crisis in the cities is the cost of transport. If the government pushes up the cost of public transport, there are riots. Because the people overseas, the city has become so expensive that the people are moving out. And the moment the people move out of the city, the cost of coming into work becomes expensive. We have a spatial distorted history, so we have moved the people long ago far out of the city. So we have a built-in crisis that we have to solve. This is one of the highest unemployment numbers in the world, and it's a bomb which is ticking. And how can we, within the current global environment, address this crisis? And everything we do, everything you do in this room must be linked back to this issue. So if we're going to address transport, what are the global forces that have an impact on transport? You may remember that I keep on saying, Prof. Nick Bernadelle says the world is marching to the beat of 3 C's. And those 3 C's is change. We live in a continuously changing world, and there's a continuously change in the requirements for the job, for jobs, for all of those things. So, and then again, if you have a labor force running at the side, if the jobs are changing, how would you bring that 10 million people in? The next one is complexity. We're living in a very complex world where we have an overload of data. And remember, data on itself means nothing. You have to move data to information, to knowledge, to opportunity. And if you don't do that, you're just going to be drowned by the data. So how do we, and as an engineer, you would always like to have all the information. You will never again have enough time to wait for all the information. So you must be able to know, yes, 80% of the information, 70% of the information, I can trust my experience and my knowledge to make a decision. Otherwise, if you wait for the full answer, you'll get a perfect answer to a wrong question, or a question that is irrelevant. And the third C is competition. We're living in a global competitive world, and if you do something good, tonight in China they're doing it faster, better, quicker, better specs, lower price. So how do you keep that competitive edge? If one looks at the forces that are shaping transport, there are 4 things: globalization, environment, pollution and greenhouse gases, the 4th industrial revolution, and the workforce challenges. So these 4 things. Globalization, it's estimated that by 2025, 60% of the world's population will be living in cities. In 20 years from now, the world will be run by cities, not by countries or provinces. The cities are where the power is, but if you have this globalization, you're going to have an increased demand for the movement of people, goods and services. And when the politicians ask me to explain what is the importance of transport, I say it's easy. It's like a lift in a 50-story building. You don't argue whether the lift is necessary or should not be there. If a lift doesn't work, you'll work up to the 8th floor. Fit people at Virgin Active will most probably work at the 10th floor, but nobody's going to work from the 10th upward. So a lift is there to make it work, and transport is there to make the cities work. Lagos currently has 22 million people. Lagos every 2 years, every 3 years, Lagos's population grows by 2 million. The end of this century, Lagos is estimated to have 100 million people. It's going to be a city that nobody has ever thought about. It's going to have challenges that you can't even imagine. The global trend is towards private car use, and we will have 6.2 billion private motorized trips per day that we have to handle. Gridlock, pollution, road traffic accidents, and a greater dependency on fossil fuels. The only way is through ICT. The only way is to whatever you do to do it smarter. You will not have a person checking if the manuals are there. You would have a system where you walk past and you take a photo with your cell phone, and that'll be gone back, and somebody will come and fix it. So the next one is environment, pollution, and greenhouse gases. I think in South Africa we have enough crises that we aren't worrying about this. But if you look at the other countries, and especially the first world countries, this is a crisis. This is a crisis in Europe. In Europe, they've made a decision, no diesel bus will be allowed in the city in Europe by 2024. So by 2024, every diesel-powered bus is out. They will not allow them to go into the city center. So this is becoming a major crisis. There seems little doubt left that climate change is one of the most significant threats to the future of humanity. Environmental pollution is one of the most serious problems. Any use of natural resources at a rate higher than the nature's capability of restoring itself can result in pollution and an ultimate catastrophe. At the moment, we are using 1.5 years of the Earth's capacity to clean itself every year. So we're actually borrowing 50% of the next year. There's also a great consensus on the important role that transport plays. We are responsible for 18% of all the greenhouse gases in the world, the transport sector. And if you look at, it's expected that by 2050, the global car fleet is expected to triple. So this 18% is going to go up to 25%, and we're going to become the bad guys in the party. Public transport is at the forefront of this fight against climate change, and as it is 3 to 4 times more energy efficient per passenger than private cars. So again, and if there's one thing that I would try to convince you today, if National Treasury keeps on saying public transport's for the poor, we're dead. We are dead. I mean, when I go to Treasury, you know, I've now been working for 48 years. My knees are shot because when I go to Treasury, I'm on my knees, and I say, please. And the first thing they say is, "Go trains for the rich, public transport for the poor." If we keep on saying public transport for the poor, we are dead. Public transport is for the intelligent people. Public transport for the people who want to make a difference in this world. If we continue saying public transport for the poor, we're dead. We have to move towards public transport use. And this is the slide that you're going to keep on seeing. The preferred mode of transport in this country and in the world is going to be walking and cycling. Then cycling, then bicycles, then public transport, then taxis, then cars, sharing, then cars, and then flying. And this is the pyramid. And you can see we're actually doing it upside down in South Africa at the moment. And this can only be done if there's a correlation between land use planning, transport planning, and economic planning. Third thing is the fourth industrial revolution. All of you have heard quite a lot about it. What is interesting about the fourth industrial revolution is that it's happening fast. And it links into what Prof. Nick Bernadel says about this change and the accelerated pace of change. So in 1784, we had the move from agriculture to factories, all right? 100 years later, oh yes, and what I must say about industrial revolutions, it always creates chaos, it always creates uncertainty, and it always loses massive amounts of jobs, right? There's no doubt about it. When you finish with it, it creates new jobs, but it creates new jobs with new skills. So if we have 10 million people running on the side, by the time they come back, the job they thought they were going to do doesn't exist anymore. So you have to keep on thinking about this. 100 years later, the second industrial revolution, where they find a new source of energy, electricity, gas, and oil, and they discover the internal combustion engine, and that's where the party started. 100 years later, the third industrial revolution, they discover a new source of energy, nuclear energy, and they start thinking about computers. In 1958, the first commercial computer is there, developed in Cambridge University in London, and the rise of telecommunication and computers. So what was common in these three industrial revolutions? All of them had three basic foundations: energy, transport, and communication. So that's what caused it. I love this picture. So now we have the fourth industrial revolution, and this is actually where machine and people start connecting, where there's this virtual world that can be created. It doesn't got to do anything about energy, but it's got to do about how can you simulate a virtual world. And the only way that you can do it is through the big data. So the big data, they say in 2015, they did a study, and they determined that 90% of all the data in the world had been collected the last 2 years. So this is the explosion. In 1981, 1 gigabyte of storage cost $500,000. Today, it's 25 million times cheaper at 2 cents per gigabyte. But what is interesting, I started working in 1971. The first computer chip, the Intel 4004, had 2,300 transistors at $1 each. The standard computer you guys are using, the Core i7, has 14.4 billion transistors at less than 1/1,000,000th of a cent each. This represents a 330 billion-fold increase in my career as an engineer. So you can imagine, and this pace is accelerating. So you know that Google has unveiled a new computer system called the Bissell Cone, and this thing is just going to throw numbers. It's going to throw data, and it's say by 2020, we'll have 50 billion connected devices with 1 trillion sensors. I've been to London to buy trains, and the trains now have sensors in them. As they operate, the sensors send information back to the depot, and there are data scientists that develop algorithms, and they then predict what is going to happen. So 5 years from now, your BMW or your Mercedes won't come in for a service. The car will tell you, go back to the garage, they have to replace this part or that part. So all of this is happening now. Connecting people to computers, connecting computers to themselves is where the fun starts. So now we have what we call disruptive technology, and this is quite interesting. If one looks at the future of mobility, if one looks at the insider view, we have the industry will evolve naturally and incrementally towards a future mobility system that retains its roots in what exists today. So we're going to take what we know, and we're just going to improve it bit by bit. And we're going to have a linear improvement. The key players, major assets, and overall structure of the current ecosystem can remain intact, while changes progress in an orderly, linear fashion. The incumbent mindset appears duly focused on sustaining the current model while testing changes in a small way. And that's how we've been doing it for the last 200-300 years. So what we have we have growth and the future, and you will see it grows on a straight line. But now we get the disruptive view. And this is where it really starts getting interesting. A whole new age is dawning, featuring fully autonomous vehicles, accessible on demand. Before long, a tipping point will occur, after which the momentum of change will become unstoppable. But now, new entrants, notably Google, Uber, and Apple, are catalysts for transformation. So we sit in this room and we think we're experts. People that don't even know transport, they walk in and they change the whole game. So you can plan as much as you like, but coming from the side will be somebody that says, I'm going to give you transport on demand. And unlike the stakeholders in today's system, they do not have any vested interest. So this is what happens. You find it comes in, there's a disappointment, there's anger. I make a point of it when I go overseas and I drive in a taxi. I say to the taxi guys, what do you think about Uber? Man, I've been thrown out of a taxi 6 times already. They say, don't talk to me about that, you know, rubbish. I say, no, I'm still in your taxi, I just want to know. But then you get this, this absolute growth, this exponential growth. I can tell you that in Gauteng we have 5,000 meter taxis. We've had them for the last 15 years, 5,000. At the moment we have 19,000 Uber taxis, or e-hailing taxis. So all of a sudden we now have 25,000 taxis that is working in a market that was 5. And the reason that is that they've created a new mode, but they've created a new demand. My children all are on Uber. I wouldn't get my daughter in a meter taxi even if I beat her. Now everybody's got it. When they go to a party on the Uber, go yeah, go there, go that. So all of a sudden there's new players and they do that. So what do we want to achieve in a public transport system? We want an efficient and effective movement of people, goods and services through an integrated transport system. And please, if there's somebody from Treasury here, it's not affordable, it's not let's spend a little money as possible, we're saying efficiency and effectiveness. That's what the key is, all right? So again, I've spoken about it, transport planning, land use planning, economic planning. And you know, one can look at the councils. When the only council that thought they had it right was Cape Town, where they then added land use planning into their transport planning. Now they've had a crisis, now they've broken them up again. But and usually economic planning, man, if the MEC or the Minister of Economic Planning talks to transport, it's just by chance. I think he's got a flat wheel and he needs a spare. Which factors can influence the achievement of this goal of ours? Firstly, our history, then the current transport, and then future challenges. So quickly, I'm just going to say, and this is a special word for consultants. If you, and I love consultants up to a point, but if you have to appoint a consultant to determine your vision and mission, please go home. Because they will determine your vision and mission which fits into their model that they have and their funding model. So don't get a consultant from America that decides to rub out the word San Francisco and write in it Pretoria. Then you must know you've got a problem. So I'm saying historically the spatial distorted land use patterns and the past policy, it's a given. We have to live with it. Poor moved very far away from the cities, resulting in dormitory towns, high cost of transport, time-consuming public transport journeys, poor access to market, service and job opportunities, and subsidized bus contracts to transport workers. And that will only stop when we've changed the land use. You know, in '94, Treasury told me, man, apartheid's dead. Now we're going to stop the bus subsidies. And they've just about done it, but they've just about wiped out the bus industry in our country. So you have to, this is the history and this is a given. RDP housing location, remember the ANC came in and said we're going to build 5 million houses. That was a good idea, the bad idea, but they built it where apartheid had planned it. So we built 5 million houses in the wrong position, which has now just increased the problem we have around transport. Low skills and skill shortages, and then the large number of population unemployed and living in poverty, which is putting a pressure on the fiscus to spend money around that and not on the transport. For many commuters, the minibus taxi developed as the only alternative mode of public transport. PRASA, I was on the SARCC board in 1993. We transported 700 million people a year. 700 million. At the moment, they're transporting 245 million. They've lost 455 million people. Must be a world record. And where have they gone? All right. Taxi industry has developed as an unregulated industry. Maintenance on transportation infrastructure and rolling stock has fallen behind. Many wrong decisions were taken in the past. It's always nice to be clever backwards, but if you read the De Villiers report in 1986, this clever man said, close down railways, let's move everything onto roads. And they started disinvesting in the railways. And you can look at the railway budget. They were investing at that stage 2, 3, 4 billion rand a year. And that time, a billion rand was a proper billion. And within 2 years, they'd cut that to nothing, So it was a policy decision that was taken by this man. I'd like to meet him or go and look for him in the old age and tell him how stupid he was. All right? Disinvestment in rail, loss of market share to road-based transport, and damage. I mean, I had a look at Geldenhuys interchange, south of Johannesburg. 10,000 trucks move through it a day. 10,000 trucks. Now, you can think about it. You can do the sums. I mean, that means you've got a few hundred every hour coming through that interchange. On the N3, 21 hours a day, there are more trucks on the road than cars. Right? Damage to the road system, increased accidents and congestion. Lack of integrated transport systems, taxi industry and unregulated, and that is still outside the public transport family, which is it's a travesty. I mean, they transport 60% of our passengers, and they're standing outside the tent. Large portion of budget is allocated to fighting poverty and unemployment, less funds available to transport, maintenance falling behind, enforcement of permissions and permits lacking, and then lack of competency in all three spheres of government. Transportation requires a knowledgeable client. Current issues, contracted bus services. I don't know if Jackie's going to talk about it, but it's a disaster. We haven't had a new bus contract since 2003 in the country. We've been rolling contracts every year. Bus industry is in a crisis. Fleet recapitalization very difficult. Uber, a new role player, and the violent resistance of the taxi industry to this new player. 13 metropolitan municipalities have implemented BRTs for the FIFA World Cup. Expensive design, and if you wanna have a horror story, go and drive on the Harambee BRT of Ekurhuleni. Man, it looks something like outer space war. It's got bridges, pedestrian bridges over every bus stop. I think it cost 50 million rand a kilometer, or 80 million rand a kilometer. That's going to be the beginning and the end of Harambee in Ekurhuleni. Slow progress rollout, punctuality and availability is an issue, and the Treasury are rethinking this. The Treasury thought they would hit it, build it and leave it. They're married to this for the rest of their lives. Approval of the NDP. We had the NDP starting in 2013. Nothing has happened, but now we have an infrastructure fund, and if you're engineer, you must always be an optimist. So I love the infrastructure fund, but maybe we're going to get money there. Development of enabling legislation. We've gone through that. Phase 1 of the Gauteng Freeway Improvement Plan has been completed. The e-tolls, the best electronic tolling system in the world. They've won 2 international prizes, but they lost the hearts and the mind of the people, and it's not working. All right? The impact on the investors market, we can't even try and work out. We have to build phase 2 and 3. And I'm telling you, I think my grandchild is too old to see that happening. Communication and consultation, what are the lessons learned? And then the kicker in this is that we've been told to enforce the user pay principle. So what's the space? Somebody's going to get up and say, you are going to pay your e-tolls. Construction of the GO-train. We've tried to change this mode of public transport, not a mode of force, but a mode of choice. We've had 2 economic studies done by KPMG and by Hatch. We've completed the feasibility study, and we're looking at value capture. What those 2 studies have told us is that for every R1 we spent on the GO-train, we've got R2.60 development back. So it's got a 2.6 times developer multiplier in it. How can we capture that? A recapitalization of Metro Rail. We are producing 1 carriage per day, 3,600 carriages in 10 years, and another 3,600 carriages for the next 10 years. We have to get the rest of the system up, the signaling, the ticketing, the access stations. We have to construct 5 new depots and a new control center. Transport Authority, we've done it, Gauteng, we've now passed the act. We now have and I'm not allowed to call it a GTA because there is a Gauteng tourism agency, so I'm now calling it the TAG, the Transport Authority for Gauteng. So the TAG is being up and running, and holistic planning, and I'm in the process of reviewing the ITMP 25. Questions need to be answered. What are the building blocks for efficient and effective public transport? How can such a system be developed? And will the system contribute to positive social and economic development in the country? And can this be achieved quickly? So I've got 10 requirements. 1, public transport, land use planning, economic planning, and must be integrated. And what we have is that in the legislation, this Transport Authority for Gauteng, we have 2 plans. We will develop a strategic transport plan, and then we'll develop an integrated implementation plan. These plans are going to be published in the Government Gazette, so hopefully we will try and get all 3 planning authorities in Gauteng into one box. Requirement 2, public transport must be efficient and effective. And this is the question: should public transport be efficient and effective in order to minimize the subsidy required, or should public transport be effective and efficient in order to maximize the benefits derived from the subsidies? And it's a question. We are now, Gauteng, we will now go out on tender on 35 contracts in the next 3 months. That's going to be a surprise. So Harry, invite me to come and talk about that in 6 months' time, to see what happens out of that. Requirement 3, ensure sustainable public transport. And this is, again, please, these 3 shifts. So we have to shift as much as possible from motorized to non-motorized transport. We have to shift as much as possible from private transport to public transport. And we have to shift as much as possible from road to rail. These 3 shifts are happening in the world. And if we're successful, we will be a successful country or a province or a city. If we're not successful, we'll be Lagos in a few years' time. And we have to make it environmental friendly, and we have to use intelligent transport systems. Requirement 4, public transport must be developed to address the key environmental issues: green transport, reduce carbon footprint, investigate and implement alternative renewable sources of energy, focus on public transport, and start telling the people of South Africa what is the do-nothing scenario. The do-nothing scenario, if we continue as we are, 2037, the average speed on the freeway system in Gauteng will be 10 kilometers an hour. 10. You can do the maths. I live 50 kilometers away. It'll take you 5 hours from Pretoria to Joburg in the morning and 5 hours in the evening. So it's gonna cram your day to go to Virgin Active. Public transport must be integrated. Creation of a transport authority, planning and priorities, data handling, subsidy allocation operations, advice on network extensions, norms and standards, common marketing and branding, stakeholder interaction, and the contract form. So these things have to happen. Requirement 6, all modes of public transport must be identified and developed. Non-motorized transport, taxis, buses, BRT, light rail, and everywhere. And please don't have anybody all ask you, is this necessary or that's necessary? all of them are necessary. If they aren't there, all of them, we are in deep trouble. Right. So requirement 7, modal transfer must be seamless. And this is really what happens. Public transport is magic while you're in the vehicle. But how do you get out of that vehicle and into the next vehicle? What happens at modal transfer? Is it safe? Is there wayfinding, people with special needs, common information, common timetables, common ticketing, data nodes, and then first and last mile, which is always the problem. 8, public transport must be safe for all users, so enforcement has to be there, transport police, enforcement of permits and permissions, role of the railway safety regulator. Requirement 9, public transport must be affordable for all users. To make it affordable, electronic ticketing is the easy part. The difficult part is the back office. There has to be a back office, there has to be a clearinghouse, and there has to be this national transport. They're saying they're busy with a public transport fare policy. I'm waiting with bated breath to see what's going to happen there. They can either push it up to the fares of SAA or push it down to taxi fares, and it's going to be a party any which way. Conclusion, great strides have been made in the development of the transportation system in certain areas of the country. Unfortunately, there are areas that have seen no change at all. Challenge is to roll out the success stories to these areas. Public transport should focus on availability and punctuality and not on making money. In the long term, sustainable funding model must be developed. Treasury has to change its attitude. And then community consultation and communication is key. So if you think public transport is easy, complex problems have simple, easy to understand, wrong answers. So please, if you think you know public transport, just read this theory of goodness. I love this quote by Nick Mandadal. It says, economic growth is the oxygen of democracy, and that's what we really need. We need to grow at 3-4% a year. We can't grow at 0.5% a year. And that is it. Thank you very much. Is there any questions? Have I offended anybody more than somebody else?
Any questions for Jack? He can't stay for a panel discussion. Going, gone. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please excuse me. All right. Okay.
Thank you so much, Jack. We're surely going to work on those requirements. Tell me, Nduduzo from Uber, has he arrived yet? Nduduzo from Uber. Not here yet. Okay, ladies and gents, we've got Prof. Jackie Walters, Strategic Advisor to South African Bus Operators Association. He's going to talk to us about future mobility related to public transport. Thank you, Prof. Jackie.
Well, good afternoon to you. Thank you, Harry, for the invitation to be here this afternoon. I think after Jack's presentation, we should all go for a drink. I'm afraid my second part of my talk also latches onto what he's been saying. You know, we can think about the clouds and going forward, but we have to be realistic as to where we are as a country in terms of public transport. Yes, so Punnett Region of Deloitte Global said the following about the mobility revolution. It's a convergence of industry changing forces from autonomous and vehicle technology to artificial intelligence, Internet of Things. Social trends such as the growth of the car sharing and ride sharing are disrupting existing transportation industries and creating entirely new systems for the movement of people and goods. And then this new mobility ecosystem offers the potential for faster, cheaper, cleaner, safer, more efficient and more customized travel. But it also presents uncertainty as organizations consider what their roles will be in this new ecosystem. If you think of mass, for instance, how it's already impacting businesses, traditional businesses all over the world through apps people carry around in their pockets. It's going to revolutionize transportation systems. And across industries, from technology to insurance, energy and more, companies will need to rethink how they create value for their customers, compete to capture value for themselves, and also transform the way they work. And for me, this really encapsulates the uncertainty that we find ourselves in going forward through the impact of technology. So what shapes future urban mobility? You can't read this, but the slides will be available. The first one is really demographics. Those that are applicable to South Africa specifically, the aging population. Although we have a bulging middle-aged population in this country, changes in travel patterns, socioeconomic factors, such as per capita income and car ownership. If I talk to my students, I ask them, what is the first thing you're going to buy when you get out here and you get a job? It's a car. And I mean, the cheapest cars today, 130,000, 150,000 Rand. Very cheap cars, but this is what they're going for. The changing travel behavior, e-commerce is changing the way we behave. Shared mobility, car sharing, carpooling, ride sharing, mobility on demand service like Uber. Jack mentioned that. It's created an entirely new market. I never used to use a taxi, now I'm using Uber. If you go out to dinner in the evening, glass or two of wine, I use Uber. Cost you a few Rand, but the cops won't catch me at the end of the day. And it's become like a normal part of life to use Uber these days. New market has been created. Active mobility, cycling and walking, first and last mile transportation, multimodal transportation systems, and virtual travel. Look at transportation technologies, autonomous vehicles, private and public passenger transport. And I'll get to this in a few minutes. Real-time information. You travel overseas, use any one of those systems in Sydney or London, Paris, Washington. You see the real-time information on your cell phone, on the stations, available through obviously things like big data, Internet of Things, mobile apps, intelligent transportation systems, and then MaaS. Then personal mobility devices, electronic scooters. We've seen that impact electric bicycles and so on. A lot of them dumped into rivers and streams and so on overseas, causing huge congestion in many of these cities, Washington being one of them. Infrastructure and communications between road infrastructure and vehicle. I'll show you something in a few minutes. Macro factors such as government policies, the drive or limit transportation demand and supply. In South Africa specifically, I think we are weak as far as this is concerned. We have nice policies, but we don't implement, we don't monitor, we don't evaluate, and therefore we have this mess with the BRTs in the country, where we really have to question the value for money proposition as far as these are concerned versus alternative investment opportunities in public transport. Greenhouse gas reduction objectives, environmental awareness, big driving force shaping the future of transportation. And then global drivers, the cost of energy, fluctuations in and the level of oil price stimulates the development and in the transportation sector, things such as the environmental concerns that we have favors really a public transport renaissance. And you can see the major amounts of money world cities are putting into their transportation systems. You go to Singapore, and every time you get there, a new line is being built. And the metro line, we talk about these, we don't do it for 10 years. But there, every time you get there, there's something new. Go to London, Paris, Sydney. Sydney's just built another 40 kilometers of underground railway line. You don't even know about it, but you get there, you get to use the system. So a lot of money is being put into these to make people mobile. And I like the point that Jack mentioned. We still have this mentality in South Africa, the public transport's for the poor. We have to get away from this argument. Because if you look at what the World Bank forecast in terms of population growth, in the next 25 years, another 500 million people in Africa will be in our cities. 500 million people, where will they go? The major cities that we know today will look totally different in terms of population numbers. We can't keep building roads because we can't build ourselves out of congestion. The more road space you build, and the Gauteng Freeway Improvement Program is a very good example, the more road space you build, the more cars you attract to the system. Within 6 months to a year, you're as clogged as you were before. If any of us living in Joburg, leaving from here to Joburg this afternoon is going to be a crisis, Harry, we must finish quickly. It was raining as well. So what are these game-changing technologies? A lot of it's been mentioned. This is a disadvantage of being a bit later in the, and Harry's moved me down twice now. Data analytics and analysis of big data. We know about that, how it's been gathered in huge volumes, the Oyster card and things like that. You can just look at that website and you can see the movement of people in and out of London and Sydney through the movements of these cars, where the peaks originate, where they come from, the intensity, everything, and they capture all of that dynamically. Mobile technology, high levels of smartphone technology provides a platform for many types of mobile applications, like, for instance, Uber, mass applications, and so on. And apps can change user behavior and commuting and assist in trip planning. But there are still issues around security and privacy issues as far as that's concerned. And I think the earlier presentation where we saw the Cape Town one, where we had numbers on the people's faces, it's actually scary to think that you're a number out there, number 3 or 4, and they track you throughout the day, anywhere where you go. In our suburbs, they're now rolling out these cameras all over Joburg, and your face will have a number. If you go walking with your dog or your wife or jogging, you'll have a number on that screen somewhere. And if that number doesn't fit there, they'll keep tracking you. This is a scary thing about technology. Connected vehicles and Internet of Things. Connected vehicles use wireless technology to communicate with infrastructure, other vehicles, other objects such as pedestrians or personal devices, and also virtual reality and telecommuting. Shared city cars, capacity of 1 to 3 people. I attended a session, workshop in Sydney a few months ago, and autonomous vehicles that cause a lot of congestion in cities. They reckon up to 15% more congestion than today, because they'll be roving around the whole time looking for business. And it's not the best solution at the end of the day. It's going to cause more congestion. This is work that comes out of America that was presented in Sydney, because they have to consider this. So these could include personal vehicles, fleet vehicles, feeder buses, shuttle bus services, on-demand transport systems, and so on. Then drone technology, in short, urban transit, for instance, from airports to downtown areas. And this is reality. We've just been approached to look at this type of technology in South Africa, whether it can work in South Africa, and the project that we're busy with. Electric and alternative fuel vehicles relies on electric propulsion and hybrid, thus reducing noise and air pollution. Alternative fuels, solar power, compressed natural gas, biofuels, hydrogen, was mentioned this morning. Personal mobility devices, electric scooters, hoverboards, skateboards, and these people can all commute up to 25 kilometers per hour in our urban areas. You see it all over. If you go to Washington, London, people are on the pavements with these things. Very dangerous, in fact. This is a unmanned UAV vehicle, aircraft that's being developed by Samat Aerospace. First hybrid electric business jet, taking off, landing, electric take-off and landing. Low emissions, CO2 50% more efficient. It refuels at the petrol station. Fast, comfortable and luxurious, up to 450 miles per hour. About 12 people, vertical takeoff and landing. So it's not airport dependent. It's independent of airports, lands on top of buildings, goes from building to building. Quick transition to cruise and landing mode. This is already in testing at this point. Earlier today was mentioned made of somewhere in China. This is being tested in Europe at this point in time. And then the lamp pole. We walk by them and our dogs do certain things to them. But look at what's going on with lamp poles throughout the world. First of all, at the top of it, you have your Wi-Fi, and this is also solar panel, app-based wireless control systems, environmental sensing, air quality and noise, listening to what's going on noise-wise, facade lighting, the traditional function, notifying you of traffic coming up, densities redirecting you, digital street signs, water level monitoring, we're prone to things such as flooding. Smart LED lighting, I see in Joburg they're busy rolling this out in the main corridors now. Concealed speakers here. Image sensing, what we saw earlier on today. Digital signage, push-to-talk and then also e-vehicles and e-bike charging. A simple lamppost. And this is already a reality. It's already functioning throughout the world. And you can see some examples here already. And Singapore, they're rolling them out as well in a big way. So this is all nice. So what are the characteristics of these systems that we see today? Is that if you look at transport in these major areas, is that transport planning takes place across municipal boundaries in an integrated manner. And transport authorities, in one form or another, play leading roles as far as this is concerned. The system is seen as one, with multiple modes of transport, each with its particular complementary role in the urban environment, urban mobility. And for the user, the system experience is in the form of things like the Oyster card in London. You buy the card, you use any mode of transport. Opal cards in Sydney, and increasingly in some systems, the use of wireless credit card tapping. Gautrain has just begun that here in South Africa. But I've just used it in Singapore. You don't buy these cards anymore, you just tap your card. At the end of the day, 12 o'clock midnight, they roll up the cost. Next morning, when you wake up, you can see how much you've spent on the system itself. So just tapping your wireless credit card, nothing to buy. And then also through cell phones. It's also integrated ticketing and marketing of these. And modern technology is used to access the systems as well as the operating side. And big data forms the backbone of these systems that results in, amongst other, dynamic routing and scheduling and data-driven decisions. A lot of our decisions, in my view, are not really data-driven. There's significant amounts of money are allocated to these integrated systems, with the major benefits of avoiding new road building programs, parking garages, lowering congestion and pollution, and freeing up city streets for pedestrians to revive central business districts and making cities once again car-free and livable. Most of the big cities throughout the world have major routes that went through them are today pedestrianized. Very nice to walk through, new shops, restaurants, very nice parks, and so on. And this is the way you have to go. We can't carry on building more roads. South Africa today, South Africans typically have embraced new technology without realizing their disruptive impact on traditional businesses. Just think about the following. You may have thought about that, but last night when I put this together, I thought we're actually using something already that's very disruptive from a traditional business. Smartphones versus traditional telephones. Who still has a telephone in the house that works with copper wires? You know, when there's a weather or lightning, you can't use your phone. So with all the enabling and endless availability of apps, the internet's impact on things like a travel agency, airline apps and booking systems today, hotel accommodation, Airbnb, Lakeslav, Booking.com. On the post office, for instance, the impact of emails and WhatsApps. How many of you still send Christmas cards or receive Christmas cards through the post office? Traditional taxi services like Uber, traditional news media like News 24's impact on the news media. Fiber and high-speed internet's impact on streaming of services versus traditional package services. We get fiber to our homes and we don't go to the video shop anymore. E-commerce's impact on traditional stores such as bookshops and music stores. The banking industry. Every now and again you hear the banks retrenching people. It's because of the impact of technology. Traditional purchasing like Takealot, Amazon, Uber Eats, eBay. Google and its impact on something as simple as an encyclopedia. When I was young, we aspired to Encyclopedia Britannica. Today you're carrying it around your pocket. And the readily available information, just some examples. So the question is then, won't traditional mass transit systems in South Africa also be caught unawares, in inverted commas, if we don't foresee and plan for these types of disruption? And I wonder if we really think about these, because we are doing nothing, in my view, that really facilitates improving public transport in South Africa. That's really fundamental and game-changing in nature, excepting here and there, like Jack has mentioned. So how prepared are we then for the future of public transport? We have had a taste of new technologies in Gautrain. I think we all enjoy it. And then also, in a way, the BRT systems, in a way. But the majority of the public transport in South Africa still remains locked in the era of 30 years ago in the third industrial revolution. That's where we are. We're definitely not in the fourth industrial revolution or touching it at this point in time in South Africa in the way we think the way we plan our systems and conceptualize our systems. We don't think that way at this point in time. The use of smart technology is mode-specific, such as ticketing, smart ticketing machines, tracking and data capture. We've seen the example this morning about Cape Town. It's focused on, in this case specifically, users using minibus taxis. We have a non-integrated modal focus. We don't have an integrated ticketing systems, integrated timetables, integrated marketing. But yet, when you travel internationally, you expect it and you experience it and you enjoy it. But we're not there. Our funding streams and our strategies, public transport strategies, are mode-specific, despite promoting integrated public transport from the first white paper in 1996 to the latest new white paper that should have come out 2 years ago, saying this exactly the same thing. Then we still don't have transport authorities in the major urban areas. This was already mooted in 1999 Land Transport Transition Act, 10 years ago. We don't have really, I say transport authorities, Cape Town may have one, Joburg may have a commission, and Durban may have one. But are they doing these functions? They're not doing these functions as you expect the transport authority would be doing in Europe, in North America, Australia, places like that, and Singapore. The successes achieved in European and British cities are due to the well-functioning transport authorities. Think, for instance, Transport for London, in London, RATP in Paris, in Australia, Transport for New South Wales, Singapore, the Singapore Land Transport Authority, and so on. In all those cities, the common denominator is you have a well-functioning, integrated public transport system. Why it's so difficult for us to do it in this country is beyond me. But we have the money. Here's an example. You may not be able to read it. And at the end of, in August 2018, we were spending about 38.6 billion rand on transportation systems in this country. It's probably closer to about 44 billion today. And yeah, but this is the problem down here on the left-hand side. This is good, but this is the problem. You have a public transport operations grant that's dedicated to commuter bus service, typical PUTCO services. You have the provincial equity share in bus subsidies, public transport network grant, PTNG, for BRTs. You have taxi recapitalization program that's just been reworked. You have scholar subsidies. You have the PRASA capital subsidy, the PRASA operation subsidy. You have the hard train, including a capital cost there, and municipal bus services. All these mean there are different funding streams supporting a modal approach, not an integrated public transport approach. We're sub-optimizing what we have, and obviously there must be savings that can be achieved here if we have an integrated approach to our transport systems. I think also what's worrying, if you just look at Gauteng, the fragmented way that we plan our systems down here at the bottom, and you may have seen these slides. We have planning for minibuses on the far left, commuter rail services in Pretoria and the Greater Johannesburg area, Gautrain high speed and its feeder buses. We have commuter bus service funded by the Department of Transport. We have conventional municipal bus services, currently proposed BRT systems, and subsidized bus services for scholars. They're all being planned separately. There's a non-integrated approach because of the way the funding streams work in South Africa. Here you have the funding sources. You have scholar subsidies, as I've mentioned, the blue at the bottom. Your BRT systems to the PTNG, for instance. Your municipal bus service paid by the ratepayers. Commuter bus services like normal PUTCO type services through the Public Transport Operations Grant. You have hard train to the province. You have passenger rail funding, PRASA. And then you have the taxi funding of the taxi recap program. If we can't sort this out, we'll never have an integrated transport system. And if we can't sort out all these institutions involved in planning these systems, it's not going to work. It will never work. The only way to go ahead from this is to get a transport authority that we put all the knowledge together and all the funding together, and you think the system is being one, not different modes of transport. So where do we go from here to capitalize on public transport, on the public transport revolution that is taking place throughout the world, but not really here? Our public transport system that supports the majority of passenger trips, taxis, buses and rail, is in for a rude awakening because we have fallen behind. And if I say fallen behind, I'm not looking at North America or Europe, or Australia, Singapore. I'm looking at other comparable countries like Chile, Brazil, those types of countries. And also in Africa. I was at the SSATP meeting of the World Bank last week in Victoria Falls. You will be amazed as to the progress that's been made in Africa around public transport integration, funding, new thinking, systems thinking, and so on. We're falling behind as far as that's concerned. So we're falling behind not only in technology, but also in the service levels and meeting customer needs. Jack mentioned the passenger numbers of PRASA, 245 million. We've spent 50 billion rand so far on BRTs, and we're transporting 38 million passenger trips per year. We're generating 38 million passenger trips per year. We spent 50 billion, and we don't stop and think, is this good money, or is it money well spent or not well spent? And it comes to policy implementation, monitoring, evaluation, and changing direction if you need to change direction. We don't have the densities in this country to support the typical South American BRT systems, but, which I think has been transferred and transplanted, the thinking in South African cities, and you have this heavy engineering that's going on, like Jack also mentioned here in Tshwane, for instance, costing you millions and millions per kilometer. Our urban areas are growing at an enormous pace. How will we deal with this in the future? Public transport is the only obvious solution. We can't keep on building roads. We have to stop thinking about specific modes. I think our public transport can serve the needs of the commuting public in an era of rising car ownership, congestion, pollution, and disruptive technologies. And we have to implement our existing policies. He mentioned we haven't had bus contracts since 2002. We haven't had. Now the province wants to put out 35 contracts in the next 3 months. And they couldn't even get the Mamelodi contract right and award that. So I don't know how they're going to do 35 contracts. So we have to implement what we have, our existing policies, monitor and evaluate them, and then adjust them based on data-driven decisions. And we have to establish capacitated transport authorities to facilitate integrated and coordinated planning and funding. Harness the knowledge that we have, put them under one roof, one area, to work together across with each other in harnessing the skills, the funds, and the knowledge that we have in our system. And then lastly, this will require unpopular decisions, political will, and letting go of the protecting my own turf scenario that we have in the local authorities today. And it's very important that we really devolve rail to the local level as well. It's part and parcel of the planning of public transport for the people in those specific areas. So it's going to be unpopular, these decisions, but we have to make these decisions. But there has to be a political will to do that. Maybe like we've had with SA last night, there's now the political will to do something about SA, which I should have done 4 years ago. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Jackie. Jack, of his requirements and your advice, surely public transport is going to improve a lot now in South Africa. Thank you very much. Tell me, Nduduza from Uber, has he arrived? Clearly has must. Well, I hope he's all right. 14:45. We're not too early. Okay. What we're going to do, I've just received a phone call from Santaku that unfortunately Vuyisile is also not being able to attend this afternoon. So my sincere apologies for that. Let me just throw this on the screen for you. Vuji is still stuck in meetings to sort out the taxi crisis. So they apologized. And now Nduza is not here either. So my suggestion is that we do a short break and thereafter a panel discussion, or we can first do the panel discussion and then we can adjourn, because I know there's so let's do the panel discussion now, I think, and then we can break, and then there's still some snacks outside, and we can do some networking afterwards, if you guys are okay with that. All right, so can we have then our panelists who's available still at the panel at the front, and that we do the panel discussion. Thank you very much. Right, let's have some nominees to join the panel at the front. We have 2 available still, the rest had to leave, but it's... Paul, what about you at the panel? Please. Lots of experience, this man. Please join the panel at the front. Yes. Nelly, sorry. This lady, Nelly, she helped us quite a lot to arrange the session today. So I really want to thank you, Nelly. Thank you very much. She's from Praza. Thank you very much. She's an ambassador for the Transport Forum. Right, Hisham is on his way from Praza. He will join the panel at the front as well. Just give him a few seconds. Right, I think we can start. The rule is that if you want to ask a question, kindly identify yourself, keep it short, try to keep it to one question. You can direct your question to a panelist or the panel as a whole. We will take, say, 2 or 3 questions, depending on the nature of the questions. Then we'll give the panel opportunity to respond. No personal attacks. First question. Yes, I'll be there for you now. Thank you. So, Mr. Paul Browning is from Transforum Consulting, Paul, and maybe they don't know you yet for today, so maybe you can just tell them who you are.
Yes, thank you, Harry. Yes, I'm a public transport analyst, I call myself. Consultant's a bit of a yesterday's word, and you have to be up with these things. My background is in public transport, rail and road, but for the last 30 years or so, I've been involved in the minibus taxi industry.
Thank you. Bjorn Leone, Cape Town based. Been in technology since 1992, but started focusing on the transport space since 2005. And so I've seen a lot of development in the ITS space. And now finally, we're getting to a space where ITS isn't seen as toys for boys anymore, with valid business applications. So, yeah, that's me.
Jackie Walters. My life has been spent at UJ as head of the Department of Transport and Supply Chain Management the last 18 years or so. Retired last year, and post-retirement contract for 2 years. But I've also been a strategic advisor to SABOA on public transport policy, strategy, and so on for the last 30 years or so, and private work at the university.
Thank you, Prof. Jackie. All right, so let's have the first question for the panelists. So there's that one, and then I'll come back to Mike.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Josh Mageto from UJ. Now, one question that is all over Africa is how can we better our public transport? But then the minibus taxis are across Africa. That is the major provider of public transport. Okay, sort of in quotes. Now, the question is, how can we integrate the minibus taxis, which are mostly privately owned, into a more formalized system of transport so that the vast majority of the low-end citizens can also have access to good, dignified public transport?
Thank you for that important question. Mike Crono.
Thanks, Harry. Mike Crono, ex-City of Tshwane. The question has been asked, or statements has been made today, that we've got to get this future mobility going. And how do we do it? From the Cape Town presentation earlier today, they've taken the ball and they started running with it in terms of data and applying it practically with public transport services. On the rail side, I think Cape Town again is challenging provincial and national government on taking the responsibility for rail planning. Seems to me it lies with local government and specifically our metros to take up this challenge, take up the functions that's legally supposed to be done by them, and just to start doing it. I'd like to hear the panel's comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Let's give the panel opportunity to respond.
Just a colleague of mine sitting across the passage with me to ask the first question around what to do with the taxi industry now. And I think this is what we are, I think what we're battling with, not only in South Africa, but throughout Africa, is how to deal with the taxi industry. In South America, they formed larger, like cooperatives. In Curitiba specifically, they used the car taxis. They formed cooperatives, and today, at the beginning, there were 10 of these major cooperatives that tended then for businesses, and they operated bus operations within Curitiba. So that was, I think, a successful transformation that they have there. In South Africa, we have the strategy of where they are affected and the BRT is retrofitted into an area that the BRT forms a bus company, or operating company, and they operate like Trans and so on. That's a model that's being followed in South Africa, but it's notoriously difficult to get this off the ground, and I think we've had a lot of learning experience as far as this is concerned. Interesting, some of the African countries are now following South Africa's model and trying to retrofit BRTs into urban areas and then getting a more formalized taxi industry into these as well. But they're the same problems that we have. You know, every time we get there, someone else to negotiate, and the issues around skills to manage these complex companies, type of technology, and so on. Very much the same as we've had. So those are two of the examples. We also have examples in South Africa where taxis have tendered for services. Mamelodi is a good example, where they wanted to tender, but they couldn't put it together. And I think this is still part of government strategy. Firstly, is to get taxis to formalize themselves in larger units and get the expertise, maybe assistance, and then tender for these services, or be subcontracted. Already it's a procurement requirement now, and future bus contracts specifically, that 30% be set aside for emerging operators. It could be small bus operators as well as taxi operators. And in Mamelodi, when it was put out in 2017 to tender over that Christmas period, it was a requirement that if you had, when you submitted your bid, you had to have an agreement in place with the taxi operators or small bus operators together for at least 30% of the service. But only one of the bidders, eight bidders or so, could put that together over that difficult period of time, and their price was one of the higher bids, so it wasn't awarded at that point in time. But speaking, I interviewed some of those bus operators. It was very difficult to put this together because there are rival taxi associations in the area. How do you put them all together? They all share, and you're going to be on their routes. You expect them to take the vehicles off the routes that you're going to operate as a bus company to support the bus company. And this has been one of the weaknesses of the BRT system, in that you buy these taxi guys out and then they re-enter the route. Then you undermine the existing BRT. So if you look at the first phase BRT, it's transporting only about 48,000 people per day, where it is envisaged to be over 100,000. But there's parallel competition with the very people or other people that you've bought out that shouldn't be on the route. That comes down to law enforcement and policy enforcement. So those are some of the thoughts around how to deal with the taxi industry. But I think the one thing that's clear is that if you look at future growth of our urban areas and sustainable urban development, it's not the taxi industry that should be there in that big numbers that we have now. It's not sustainable.
So I'm going to respond to the formalization of the taxi industry first. In Cape Town, we are currently running a proof of concept, and we formalized a taxi association into a transport operating company, as opposed to a vehicle operating company that's involved with BRT. So this is an association that is currently not touched by BRT. So the city assisted them in forming the corporation. We assisted them with business cases. The city is currently has allocated contracts to them in terms of the cleaning contracts and the security contracts on the public transport interchange that they operate from. And we are obviously assisting them with technology. Interesting is that this association, or TOC, is now reporting something like a 40% drop in their maintenance bill. They're running scheduled services, and they can service their routes by 60% of their previous capacity. Littering, now that they are responsible for the cleaning up of the facility, has dropped by something like 60%. They run fixed schedules. The drivers are being paid a salary with all the UIF and tax implications that go along with that. And basically what this company can show is that their bottom line has increased tremendously ever since they've gone into this formalized space. Whether that model will be acceptable to those that do not want to be monitored is a totally different discussion. But it can work. it is being shown to work. It does require an investment from whatever governing structure governs them. It requires an investment in order to get them to that space. It's difficult for people who have a fixed business model where they know how to make money and they know how to make it work to transform to something else without assistance. So that's the one thing in terms of, and then Mike, in terms of local government having to run all modes of public transport within that metro's geographical area, that's an old point that, say, Cape Town has been trying to sell to National for a long time. It has not flown yet, so I suspect the realities of the system and the requirements for integrated public transport will eventually drive that process instead of a political initiative.
Thank you. I want to add something about the minibus taxi and formalisation or participation in formal structures. I'm interested in what's been happening in Cape Town, and the question that we might ask is it the exception that proves the rule? Are there certain circumstances within this particular pilot project that make it more likely to be successful? And as it happens, I believe that that is the case. In October 2015, more than 4 years ago, the Cape Town City Council adopted a resolution that said, with adopting a game-changing policy for the minibus taxi, we're going to encourage them to form taxi companies, and then they'll be able to do X and Y and so on and so forth. Now, one would have expected the doors of the Metro Centre to be broken down within the next few days by taxi leaders saying, please come and tell us how we can make, but it hasn't happened. And I will just simply say that the government, in dealing with the taxi industry, must recognise that whilst it and Jackie's bus operators and so on operate in the formal sector of business with a formal sector mindset, the taxi industry is in the informal sector and has far more in common with the people who sell oranges on the side of the road than it has with Golden Arrow, for example. Now, I could go on a long time about that, and I won't do so, but I believe that the attitude, the approach of government must change to recognise, just 20 words, the enormous importance that an individual taxi owner places on his individual ownership. Thank you. You won't hear the questions.
Thank you to the panel so far. So can we have the next question for the panel?
Okay, good day, colleagues. My name is Tim Kosuzungu, representing TOX. I'll address my question to Professor. There's a lot of money that has been thrown to quite a number of projects, and where we have failed to impact the society at large. And the rationale behind that is the fact that there are no implementers. And all the presenters have alluded on that. And that has not been well addressed, that we don't have capacity to implement projects. And as far as I read a while back, we still import the consultants to implement quite a number of major projects. In your experience, in terms of the benchmark, what can we do? Because I think we do discuss that this is where we want to be, but we don't hit hard on how or whether we're going to be able to do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sapia Apu from Oricon. It's two questions. One is to the gentleman from the City of Cape Town. Just in terms of the access to the data, and have you encountered any privacy issues or any issues around, just monitoring people without technically their knowledge, just out of interest? And then it was more of a comment around the industry, the minibus taxi industry, and I think one of the at one of the previous transport forums, the lady from Santaco made a very strong point to say that the strengths of the minibus taxi industry, and she highlighted what they were, and she also highlighted what they want. And I think acknowledgement of the fact that they're very good in the space of actually delivering a service, but not around the governance structure, is really where our focus needs to be. But that's just a comment. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's take, there was one here.
Good day, everybody. My name is David Sadi. I am with Regen Energy Solutions. My learned partner here, Lex, and myself came to visit today and first time on the forum. It's very interesting. We represent a new disruptive technology in the supercapacitor, ultracapacitor frame, and also can assist with the hydrogen environment, but I don't see a lot of that. Now, there's two aspects. It's the types of transport that's involved, and the other is converting the current transport to be more efficient. And to be more efficient, one can apply regenerative braking to existing infrastructure such as trains, buses, trucks, and you can also apply the same hydrogen as was mentioned previously as well. So I would like to know, where are the different industries in investigating the conversion of current infrastructure to be more efficient and to be more CO2 friendly? Thank you.
Thank you. The panel can respond.
Okay. In terms of the access to the data and privacy issues, we obviously just assign a number to you. And so we haven't had any privacy issues up to now because that data collection is POPI compliant. I know that the moment this gets out, and it probably will after today, Harry, that we're collecting all this data, there is going to be a clamour for the data from various people in the transport planning space. And we'll have to apply the city's policies in terms of that data sharing. We'll hope it will be an exchange and not just a sharing. Then on the energy part, we've been running a traffic signal in Cape Town for the past 6 months on supercapacitors. So in terms of the transport space that's under control of the city, where we are utilizing big amounts of energy, that is the first initiative in that space, in addition to the old solar and wind powered issues. And it's been doing very well. We've breezed through the recent load shedding scenarios, and the cool thing about supercapacitors is it's not a very obvious box along the side of the road that contains batteries that can be used in trucks. And so it doesn't get moved into the alternative economy. And so that pilot has proved to be very successful. Okay.
Just on the energy side, this is the one area I think we're not doing well at this point in time. You know, there's lots of developments around electric vehicles, buses, for instance, battery-driven, hybrid buses, CNG. Many cities are running on CNG buses and so on. So the last real demonstration project in public transport that I'm aware of was about 30 years ago, when it was trolley buses, when they compared different trolley buses in Joburg. And it was actually an excellent result at the end of the day, because it's a long-lasting piece of equipment, 25 years at least, with little maintenance, but it never went any further. In Cape Town, I know there are electric buses standing there through some issue that they've had there. I know the bus operator has approached the city to try and operate those and see how they work in practice. And I'm not sure whether they've allowed that. It's a supply chain issue, but the buses are standing there, probably rusting in the Cape Town weather. But it'll be nice to see that operator trying 5 or 10 of those buses on the routes where they could operate them and look at the comparative analysis of diesel buses versus electric. So yes, and if you look at London, there are many demonstration projects going on, different energy sources there. as well, electric buses being one of them. The other issues, of course, that operators say, you know, if they operate electric buses, why must we provide the infrastructure? We're not in infrastructure, we're in operations. So the arguments around that and the funding and so on. But certainly I think the bus industry, I know, will be very keen to look at new technology, to try and test new technology in our circumstances. Just a question around how do we go forward? I think going forward is we need transport authorities, because we have a lot of expertise in the country. We don't always need international consultants to do the work. There are very knowledgeable consultants in South Africa, very knowledgeable consultants. And in local authorities, you have people that are very knowledgeable about planning. They know about finance, they know about marketing. Bus companies, for instance, rail companies, they know about marketing, how to contract, because you're always contracting. So if you look at the Transport Authority in typical functions, you're looking at planning of the operations, you're looking at the operation itself, scheduling, you know, managing those schedules and the bus and the rail and the taxi. But all those industries, there's experience. There's the financial side that you have to deal with. The actual contracting, how do you contract? There must be some form of contracting going on, depending on the model that you're using, from a management contract to a full open tender situation to a negotiated contract. So those skills are in the country. We have the marketing skills, we have HR skills, we have skills around infrastructure, but it's everywhere. This is a problem, it's everywhere. And if we have an authority, we can pull those skills together. Nobody will lose their work. They'll actually get more work if we establish an authority. So if you look at a typical authority like Transport for London, it's a huge authority but with a huge function. Over 20,000 people working in this authority. So I'm not saying we must be as big as that. There are many smaller authorities, about 70, 80 people in other cities in the UK. But this is how what we should do. We have scarce skills, but everywhere. And they're not pulled together in one place to think collectively about how do we deal with public transport going into the future. IT skills, the new technology that you've been speaking about. It's everywhere, but it's not honest. We don't get synergies around that. And the answer lies, and we've realized that in South Africa, we have to have transport authorities. It was put into the Land Transport Transition Act and taken out afterwards, and now it's in there again, but a bit hidden. And this is the way to go about this thing. This is how cities of the world have gone about organizing public transport and successful systems in the world. And these authorities are very proactive, fleet-footed. They know the latest technology. They know all the tricks of the operators, because they come from the operators, many of them. So there are many ways of dealing with this, but the authorities, for me, is the unlocking mechanism. If you can get that going, pool the funding, pool the thoughts around managing these systems, planning these systems into one authority, will make progress. And this recipe has been proven throughout the world over and over and over again. At the moment, it's everywhere. It's at the provincial level, it's at the national level, it's at the local level. It's fragmented, as I've shown you. And we will not make progress unless we sort this thing out.
Okay, just maybe on the gentleman's question. I think you've covered basically in terms of the expertise. I mean, certainly in our experience, local expertise is certainly definitely up to scratch in terms of doing in the rail sector as well, both from a consultancy as well as construction. I'm not quite sure if your question was also leading to also making sure the involvement of the SMMEs. Because certainly, I mean, that is part of supply chain policy. Depending on the size of the projects, typically projects over 30 million, you need to have SMME involvement to ensure there's also capacity building in those sectors. But certainly we do have the skills, experience and capacity in South Africa on many of our transportation projects. Secondly, when it comes to the issue of new technologies or energy sources, I did raise the issue of hydrail, hydrogen-powered rail, in my presentation, and I think one needs to acknowledge it's a new concept in South Africa. Very little discussion has happened around it. I know there's been quite a bit of work done internationally on that, but it's certainly something I think needs to be explored, because if one looks at particularly our rural environment, where we've got vast rail networks, many of it not electrified and vulnerable. And one of the things that PRASA Pacific is looking at, how do we reduce our energy costs as well? Currently we're running, whether it's diesel or diesel electric, and if there's potential certainly to lower our energy cost. Currently it's sitting as the second highest expense on our books is energy. So certainly that is something that I think one needs to look at. And I think if you're looking at, I think your question is, where do you start engaging on some of these things? Is one, make a request to perhaps present your ideas, whether it's through the Department of Transport, approach PRASA. We can have discussion on that, at least to get some understanding of what is in the space. But it's still, like I say, still at its infancy stages within discussion in South Africa.
Thank you for the panel. Nduduzo just SMS'd me, he said he's arrived. Nduduzo, maybe you can come join the panel at the front and at least answer some questions. Appreciate that. No, there's a chair. We'll give Nduduzo opportunity, 5 minutes or so, to tell us what you wanted to tell us. Unfortunately, we already concluded, but no problem. So let's give Nduduzo then some opportunity just to tell us a bit more about what you wanted to tell us, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. You sure? Okay. All right. Right. Here's a question to the panel.
Hello, I'm Shelley Childs from Transforum. I want to make a sort of comment, which is also a question, and then ask another question. The first one is actually about people. We have a tendency, not just in South Africa, but worldwide, to say this is our policy, we decree, and therefore the masses will obey. And I think the e-toll saga is one example of where it failed hopelessly. In fact, the only thing it did is make the general public distrust the authority even more. And in fact, another instance has just occurred here. I don't use PRASA. It doesn't enter my orbit for any reason whatsoever. But our first speaker painted a very pretty picture of where PRASA stands and where it's going and so on. And I think it's the responsible thing for him to do. But I'm just a member of the public when it comes to PRASA. And I'm very aware of the mess that PRASA is in. And it's not just about corruption. All the skill is available, it's there. So why aren't we doing a better job? Why are we in the mess? Why for 25 years are we in the kind of mess we have? Which is largely about failing to deliver a service that is valued by the end user. So I take it a little bit further to Professor Walter's comment about buying out members of the taxi industry and then they go into competition again with the BRT system. Why does it happen? And I think part of our problem is we don't take people into consideration. We don't take the behavior of people into consideration. We don't take into consideration how they're going to react. Because this is an engineering world. It's got nothing to do with people. So we have no behaviorists active in it, saying, well, maybe they don't see the negotiated contract in the same way. So that's just a comment. But my other comment is also, I suppose, largely to long-distance transport professionals generally, and that is, are we 100% sure that the way our society is structured at the moment, you know, the way the cities are formed, where we have our shops, where we have our schools, where we have our hospitals, where people go to work, is the optimum? Because everything I've heard is just about continuing to do things in the same way and just tweaking the systems to do it a bit better. So we are always going to go long distance to work. Well, why? Why don't we work closer to home? So my question is the planning of transport assuming that there's going to be very little change, that we're going to have big cities and the work is going to be at a central point and we're all going to flock to the central point and flock out again? And I'm not really talking about an alternative for professionals to occasionally work at home. I'm talking about restructuring the way our society is currently pulled together. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Shirley. Another question?
I'm Sinethemba Zonke. Just to, I think, the point that was made by Shirley now, I think is quite important. I think that a lot of the talk has been focused on the urban model, and we've been hearing talks about how the world is urbanizing and 60% of people will be living in urban areas, but there'll still be people in the rural areas. And why aren't we talking about how transport will service those people? And again, I mean, is it inevitable that we will just live in these cities? If you speak about Lagos, which has got 22 million people, do we really want that? Can't we have better transport systems, particularly in terms of rail, where we can be able to have high-speed rail, which is further outside such dense cities with lots of populations that can connect spaces that are further away. And as well, I think if we can talk about other forms of transport, I mean, I'm glad the person from Uber, but other technologies such as e-commerce that can deliver products to people who are further away. I think that is also something that can be considered in terms of transport. What are things that can be delivered to people, what people can buy? That's a very important part to think about in terms of transport. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The panel can respond.
I think the cities of the world, including South African cities, are typical cities where you have a huge inward movement in the mornings and outbound movement in the evenings. And I think to try and put people further away from places of work through transportation systems could be very expensive. And maybe that's not the solution. I mean, the thinking, I'm not an urban designer, urban expert, but I mean, you try and densify your cities to make the transport system more affordable, better utilized, 18 hours a day, maybe 24 hours a day, and that's how you recover your costs. But having spread out of a city and work opportunities especially, I think will increase the cost of transportation overall in the city itself. Some cities have tried to de-densify. I think it's in Turkey, where Istanbul, where they built a light rail. Initially it was free to get people to move out of the city because there was such pressure in the city itself on infrastructure, sewage systems, water, things like that, to try and get the people out. But eventually I think we saddled with these high density cities like the New Yorks and the Washingtons and the Londons and Paris and so on, Joburg maybe. But in South Africa, as I say, we are not as dense. And therefore, our transport system is very expensive and very inefficient. If you look at South American cities, in some of those cities, the traveling distance per day that people do, 6 kilometers to work and 6 kilometers back. And they transport up to 1,800 people per bus per day in those cities, 18 hours a day. In South Africa, we transport 180 people on average per bus per day. That's it. Same equipment, also need a driver, you need roads and things like that. So your density of the city has an impact on the transportation system and vice versa. So I think we are stuck with these types of cities that we have for many other reasons that may not be socially very nice and so on. Yeah, if you look at the Oyster card movements, you can go to the internet and just type in Oyster and look at the movements of people in and out of London. It's a huge inward movement in the mornings and the outward movement in the evenings. And the aeroplanes do the same thing. It's interesting. Between cities of the world.
There's, I guess, not much I could add to that. But I think, just to your point, though, and to the gentleman's point, where in terms of how we need to start also reimagining cities, is to your point, where cities need to be about where people live, work, and play. The model of actually just having people moving in and out is, to an extent, technically the status quo. But as the professor has pointed out, most of these cities, in terms of they can't actually handle some of that infrastructure. And Johannesburg is no different. And I think with Joburg, what also, to an extent, highlights this is the fact that most developers in and of itself almost go and develop any old way that they want. So from an actual spatial planning perspective, the cities don't have that much reign over these developers. And the only reason why cities allow this to happen is because they actually want that kind of investment to remain into these cities. Yeah, I think from that point.
Sorry, just to add to that, that's very market driven. Developers build what the market wants. And so I think the challenge to a city when they look at densification and things like that is to actually change the market perception on high-rise, dense apartment or residential developments, etc. In Cape Town, we got to the point where we actually integrated land use and transport in one department, and we were making massive strides in integrated planning. And then the initiative fell out of political favor. And so the formalized structure was broken down, but fortunately, the officials have now learned to work together. So the business processes are actually happening still, even though it's not within a formalized structure. And we are now working on systemizing those business processes so that a development application for 400 households will be evaluated in terms of the transport impact in that region at least. So there are things happening. I think the problem that we have is that a lot of these things are dependent on the political atmosphere of the day. And I think we need to get to the point where it is realized by the decision makers that it is in the best interest of our cities.
Sorry, you had other comments about the behavior of people. As far as I know, in the BRT in Joburg, there were formal agreements to take vehicles off the road, and they joined the bus operating company in the different ways, you know, on management or drivers or whatever the case may be. But the idea was that they would not re-enter the routes. And why they've re-entered is because of lack of law enforcement. There should have been more active law enforcement on the route by the local authority, which there wasn't. And that's why the system is not viable at this point in time, where it's transporting half the number of people it should be transporting. And to do it now, it's going to be very difficult. You probably have to buy out another set of people to get them off the route. But that's the problem. You have to police these routes based on the rules of the game that you set with these operators.
So, yeah, so that begs the question, why do our commuters choose a minibus taxi above a very fancy BRT system? And that is also something that should be considered in planning the next phases.
Shirley, if you wanted a response. No, I think you posed a valuable question. I'm not going to go into detail. I'm not quite sure whether there's a question even why we're in this mess. There's a comment. But I think just to add on what you're really picking up from the press and stuff, I think the reality in rail, and I did make it clear, I didn't touch on the current challenges we've got, but a lot of it has also happened because we've had 3-4 decades of underinvestment in rail. That is why we're at a point where we need to completely overhaul the whole system. Ideally, you should have done that at intervals when it was required and not at the end of the lifespan of this infrastructure. But I think your second point was hitting the nail on the head in terms of where we need to go with future mobility. And it's about the passenger. It's about the public. And we need to take into account this transformation that I was referring to earlier, to understand what is it that the passenger wants. I think if you look at PRASA specifically, our market is basically a captive market to a large extent. It's people that do not have a choice that is getting on the train. And certainly in the future, with the estimates of economic growth that we will see. We're talking now through to 2050. That captive market will then, in practice, it will actually then diminish, and our market will become smaller. So certainly one needs to look at attracting choice users, people that have a choice and they will choose rail or whatever mode of transport there is. And therefore, listening to what the passenger wants is critical. And I've listed some of the things that we need to go about. We, for example, do have, in each of our regions, we've got the commuter sort of associations that we meet with on a regular basis. But we need to extend beyond that. And we move into this digital era where we can communicate, understand what is the requirements, so that the service we deliver responds to that. And I think that is a critical one that we need to look at in terms of rail specifically. The second point, and although it was covered, I do believe that you look in any of the town spatial plans of any of the cities, and you will see all the right things are mentioned in there. You'll see densification. You'll see infilling. You'll see compact development. You'll see the issue of transit-orientated development. I think the reality is these things don't happen also overnight. Yes, we do still see a tendency of developing towards the periphery, where it's cheaper to develop, if I can put it that way. But some of these things, and I think you are starting to see some examples where we're trying to focus development around key transport hubs, some of the rail stations. You do see some densification happening on some of the corridors, but I think not to the rate that we would like to see it happening. From a rail or a BRT or any other perspective, you want to see this densification to make these modes a lot more sustainable in terms of the numbers that we are moving. And then lastly, on the gentleman's point about rural, you're quite right. I mean, we should not take our focus off rural transport requirements. Certainly from a PRASA perspective, it's something that is in our strategy. Obviously, you don't roll out the same system you've got in an urban situation in a rural. But we do have solutions that we have developed, typically what we will call your diesel or electric, or in the future hydrogen multiple units, typically a smaller train set, looking at the demands that you have got in the rural areas. I think the one positive we do have is that we do have a vast rail network in South Africa. Not everything would have to be rail though. I mean, that's what we need to understand. You do need also some threshold in terms of passenger numbers to make that service viable. Otherwise, you may be better suited with whether it's a taxi or a bus in terms of providing those solutions. But certainly where that demand is warranted, we do have rural rail solutions that we have developed that we can look at going forward.
One of the points that Jack van der Merwe made on one of his slides was the need to reduce the need to travel. Reduce the need to travel. And I'm fairly sure he was talking about peak hour travel. And I wonder whether sometimes our transport policies and strategies actually act against that. Just very quickly, the Gauteng freeway network, not the recent improvements, but the 1970s and so on, made it possible for people in Pretoria, for example, to travel to the East Rand to work in a way that they couldn't do previously. And so obviously some of the problems that we have then are, as it were, self-inflicted, and you're not going to take away the freeways now. But is it possible that, for example, extending Gautrain to Soweto would merely make it easier for people in Soweto to travel long distances to go to work? I just leave that thought in the room.
Great, let's make it the last round now. Mike, let's just get this camera.
Harry, thanks. It's more a comment, and we touched on the element of we need to travel less. But it's not only in peak hours. We have a spatial problem, and if we talk about development and infill and all those nice words, it will mean nothing because we'll still travel a lot. We've got to have mixed land use, where you can live, work, play, everything together. You can walk to the shop next door or close by. You can go have a nice green field close by where community can interact after hours and over weekends. You know, that's when you get social inclusion, all these things that we actually need. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike? This is then the last one, and then thereafter we will give the panel also opportunity to do some closing remarks.
Thank you, Harry. Just in response to what Professor Jackie said there as well, with the buses standing, the battery buses, it is true that the technology has changed considerably in the last few years. Considerably. Graphene is it's not a recent discovery scientifically, but it's the ability to produce products with graphene has actually only become viable now. Elon Musk proved that. He bought our competitor overseas in America. We represent the Estonian-German side of the ultracapacitor. But the combination of graphene in lithium and in capacitor technology made it possible for anything that uses considerable amounts of energy to function properly. Batteries get drained by a high drain, a massive, if you apply a massive current draw on a battery, it destroys it. Typically on the battery, the buses that you are talking about, Prof, those buses would have been destroyed. Probably they are the old lead acid type technology, but the capacitor provides, like in the Formula One cars now, currently, they use KERS technology, and they can apply the capacitor storage where you efficiently deliver the requirement on buses, trains, etc., and efficiently stores it again. And that's only because of the recent advent of graphene. Thank you.
Thank you for that. All right, so let's give the panel opportunities there. Let's take that last question then. This is the last question.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Ronald Rutsito. I am a construction management and quantity surveyor student at the University of Johannesburg. It's my first time here. I'm actually working on something of my own, a personal project. It's dealing with the public transport, especially with the taxi industry. I believe that one of the reasons why the taxi industry hasn't been able to let's say, to be in the future as we currently are right now is because nothing has been done that benefits the actual passenger or the driver. Like we always focus on how can we burden the taxis actually themselves, because now I hear we're talking about we're talking about electric taxis, but then nothing is being done when it comes to the public itself and the driver itself. So one of the things that I actually saw that long distance drivers are struggling from is the issue of, let's say, for example, showering. If somebody, let's say a taxi driver is coming from Limpopo and they're coming here to Johannesburg on a regular basis, let's say they're driving a taxi for a long distance. When they come here, I've come to the realization that they struggle with points to shower. You know, like there are no public showers available. In as much as public toilets are available in abundance, there are no showers. I'm sure that everybody who is in here, for you to get here, you must have showered. But then you must have showered, and you definitely have a place to go back to shower. But then when it comes to that driver that is spending a night in Johannesburg, the driver that is spending a night in Limpopo or wherever they are far away from home, there are no facilities that are there for these people. So what I've done is that I have actually created facilities that can be used by long distance drivers and passengers for either showering and also sleeping services. And then the problem number two that I noticed is that I'm sure this is a countrywide problem. Taxis are getting washed in the streets. There is not an official or a single official washing bay for taxis. Why is that? Why haven't we created a formal place where taxis can get washed? I can give you an example where I stay. I stay close to Ellis Park Stadium. There's between 75 to 100 taxis that get washed every day. And bear in mind, they're using at least 60 liters of water to wash. That's about 140 tons of water that is getting wasted only on one taxi rank, bear in mind. So what I've done is that I've also created a taxi washing bay that is automated, and I have about up to 3 maximum services that 3 facilities that I've created that can be used by the public and the driver as well, using a single smart card system. And then I believe that this is actually one of the things that is missing within the transport industry, because we are struggling with the way in which we can I don't know what to say, but then we're struggling with a system that can combine the industries. As we said, the taxi industry is on its own. Because of the technology, they are so left behind, and I believe that this single smart card system is something that can be implemented to make life better. So the question is, I've been busy with this project for the past, okay, in February, this coming February will be 2 years. I haven't had the right person or the right department to talk to about this, because trust you me, I've been to the Department of Road and Transport, I've been to PRASA and all of these places, but then what I'm struggling with is somebody that can actually understand where I'm coming from and somebody that can actually entertain the idea, because this is something that is a niche project and it's something that is innovative. Thank you.
Thank you for that important one. That's what we call diversification. Right, so the panel can respond. Can we ask also that the panel then, maybe we can start at Hashim, comment on the questions and then also do closing remarks, and then you can pass on to Paul and we take it from that side then perhaps.
Apologies, I thought I mainly heard comments. Maybe I didn't pick up a question. Did I miss a question? Okay. But certainly from the student at the back there, if he's struggling to find, I'm willing to leave my details, raise it with me, and I can point you in the right direction within PRASA if there's an opportunity for something like that to discuss further. But maybe just some closing remarks in keeping in line with this future mobility theme. I do believe that the next decade particularly is going to be critical for public transport, I think, in the country. We're really at a critical point in time. If we look at the previous 2 decades, and bearing in mind that the last 20 years we've had very pro-public transport policy in place. But yet, if you look at what has happened in this last 20 years, we've not seen the results of that policy. So, for example, of the shift to public transport is not realized. In fact, there's been an increase in terms of private vehicle usage over the past 20 years. And one can unpack that into various for various reasons, but I think one of the key things is a lack of implementation of various initiatives that has not happened. We've seen a few new projects that's come online with the BRTs, Gautrain and so forth, but I think it's not enough in terms of making that shift towards public transport. So certainly the next decade it cannot be business as usual. If we want to see public transport play the role it should be playing in a sustainable way. So I think that is critical. The one thing that we need to see happen as well is the issue of integration. I think it has been a challenging, and we've heard from the colleagues, some of the challenges of even when it comes to rolling out the BRT or the other systems. And we need to maybe even have a rethink about transport planning in terms of where each mode should be operating. Or should we also look at the situation of if you've got more than one mode operating there, it becomes a choice. Because certainly it's been very difficult in the last 20 years to get things going because of a resistance towards rolling out particularly the new mass transport projects. And I think that needs a serious look how we can progress with those projects. We have seen certainly and I presented it today, that there's a lot of things happening in the rail space in terms of getting to a point where we will have a more modern rail system. But important for PRASA is the issue of, and what Shelley was raising, making sure that you actually become customer-centric. Take cognizance of what it is that the passenger wants. And you're not just providing a service. It's not just an engineering solution that we are providing. Yes, engineers can build a very fancy railway network, come with very fancy trains, but if it does not meet the needs of the public, it's not going to mean very much. So certainly going forward is to understand and take into account those needs of the public. That for me is one of the critical things that we need to look at. And maybe just lastly from our side, from PRASA's side, is also to look at how do we improve our operations. While we are doing quite a bit on the infrastructure side, We need to make sure that from an operational point of view, it is done in a way that meets those requirements, that is easily understood by the passenger. If any of you were, and I mean, I've got experience of that, if you were to walk into one of our stations and just do a simple thing like understanding the timetable, it becomes very difficult. You'll see a huge A-note, A-note page of the timetable with very erratic times. And those are simple things that I think we need to look at in terms of simplifying, make it easy to understand, and make it easy to access.
Thank you, Sean. Oh.
On future mobility, the fourth industrial revolution is going to make huge changes in the world of work. Automation is going to make big changes to the factory floor, and the internet is already making and will make more changes to the need for people to travel in the way they did in the Victorian era, to travel to offices and sit at a high desk with a quill pen with a supervisor looking down on 40 or so people because that's the way he knows, etc. That's going to, it ought already to have changed with the internet, but it's going to change. And so that's going to make a world of difference to the world of work or the world of commuter travel demand. And the old predict and provide is not going to be, the old ways are not going to be the same ways. And therefore, we need to keep flexible. We need to keep our transport, our public transport in particular, as flexible as possible. That doesn't mean to say there can't be large investments and so on, but we must recognize that if we're setting off to do something now that's going to take 15 years to complete, and if there's anybody here from Durban, BRT, then you know what I'm talking about. And so I like the idea of we need integration, and we need this, and we need X, and we need Y, and we need rail, yes, undoubtedly, and so on. But they may well need to change, and we can't. I'll leave it at that. The world of work is going to change. The world of commuter travel demand is going to change, and both rail and public transport needs to bear that in mind.
Thank you, Paul. Bjorn.
That flexibility that Paul just mentioned is actually what gives the agility of the minibus taxi industry a competitive advantage in this space. They can react quickly to a demand, and they can satisfy it fairly quickly and sort out the regulatory space afterwards. It's just what it is. In terms of the wash bays, in Cape Town we've had a drought in recent years, so even at the facilities where we do have wash bays, we've actually shut down the water points. But in cases where we haven't done that, we usually supply a smart water meter, prepaid one, and the association then pays for their own water usage. At one of our PTIs, Wallisdean, we've done a whole recycling water plant. So all stormwater and wastewater gets captured in the area, goes through some filtering, gets stored in underground tanks, and then it gets pumped back up to the wash bay, and that the wastewater from that wash bay gets captured again. So there are some initiatives in that regard, but being a tech guy, this whole thing about a smart card for it just tickles my fancy. That's just me. To come back, we are looking, as Hisham is saying, we are on this verge of actually really making public transport work, or the need to make it work. There's a lot of talk about big data and AI and machine learning, and they're all buzzwords in the industry. And I think what we need to do is to actually work on those things, start collecting big data in a meaningful way, and apply processes to it that does not involve manual processes. That's where it normally falls down. And use that information to actually optimize our services.
Thank you, Bjorn. Prof. Jackie.
Just a few words. I think when traveling internationally in the developed and developing world, it's very obvious sometimes when you travel these cities that there's been major improvements in public transport. It's very visible and you can use it, it's user-friendly and so on. And South Africa has fallen behind, and it's increasingly falling behind many of our peers that we are comparing ourselves, that we like to compare ourselves to. Public transport should really be one of the highest priorities in our sustainable city, urban development scenarios in South Africa. And unfortunately, it's not the case. So it's going to require strong political will to make unpopular decisions around how we manage public transport in the future. And hopefully we'll have the politicians to do that, as long as they don't keep on tweeting so much.
Thanks, Prof. Jackie.
What else can I add? So I think from my side, this speaks back to the issue around commuter behavior, right? And it's been touched on here in terms of why, I guess, taxis make so much sense for so many commuters, is the fact that they are agile, right? They are able to respond to change and to new opportunities far quicker than the state can. And as has been mentioned here, it's also the issue around legislation that they let happen afterwards. And unfortunately, the state in and of itself is also quite slow in terms of actually licensing, not only them. And I think this also speaks to how tech companies have also managed to learn, to an extent, how from the taxi industry, and Uber being one of them, right? Being a disruptive technology isn't necessarily about just creating an app. It's actually about understanding what a market needs and how people want to move and where they want to go to. And I think that also then speaks to, I think, my next point, where it should be rather an invitation to not just public transport integration in terms of the state and the SOEs, but this is actually a great opportunity for them to actually have private and public partnerships. There already are entities out there that exist that actually have this data, and it's literally just about the state in and of itself either integrating or actually working with these entities. Because these entities are agile, whether it is the minibus taxi industry, because to an extent they are private entities. They're not part. They only just service the public, and it actually speaks to how the BRTs to themselves, how they almost aren't actually as effective as they should be. Because if I'm a commuter and I understand where to walk to, which is closer than a BRT station, because most of the BRT stations in Joburg alone are like over 500 meters away from your point, where you go to catch them, and I can get a taxi, which I will wait for 5 to 10 minutes for, as opposed to 30 minutes off peak. That makes more sense to me. And for all their faults, the taxi drivers in themselves are still innovative in actually being able to just keeping to their routes, but actually trying to find passengers, right? And to an extent, that's where we've also learned, where it's about trying to find ways of where you get the passenger from one point to another in a more quick and more efficient way. And I think that's where I think the state should also start leaning on, in terms of not necessarily figuring out a way of trying to bus as many people as possible, but actually trying to integrate whether it is with e-hailing or with taxi operators, and actually getting them to these points in a more efficient way. And then I guess, then it also speaks, that also then leads to the spatial planning aspect of things, right? Where data is gold, big data is gold. Actually understanding people's movements, understanding what people want and how they want to move should be number one to the state. And I think what the state should, as the state and the various entities they should concentrate on is not necessarily how figuring out and telling people how to get to what mode of transport to use to get to whatever destination, but rather facilitating ways of actually getting them to those destinations.
All I heard is that Uber is willing to give us their data.
As long as the city of Cape Town gives us licenses.
Indeed, giving our panel a hand. I think this was an excellent panel. Thank you very much. Let's say goodbye now to the online people. Thank you for following me. We greet you, and we will see you again on the 6th of February. The next Transport Forum will be in Durban, hosted by Trade and Investment KwaZulu-Natal. And we're talking about investment and development in that region. So thank you very much, and we'll see you again. Cheers.
Driven by custodian Harry van Heestien, the Transport Forum has grown from strength to strength since 2006. Throughout this time, it has maintained the aim of being an industry leader in collaboration, networking and connecting industry leaders.
Our department's involvement in the Transport Forum began more than 10 years ago when we were invited to establish the Transport Forum. And from the beginning, it was very evident that there's a need for information dissemination to the transport and supply chain industry in South Africa. Right at the beginning, we had 8 to 9 people attending sessions. Today, we have more than 150 people attending sessions. The topics that we choose to present in the forum depends on burning issues within the industry, trends, developments, legislative changes, and so on. And we invite leading speakers to share their experiences and information with our audiences in South Africa. One of our other benefits is also that the audience could ask questions, very interactive in nature, and I think it benefits really not only our department, the university, but also our students, as well as the members of the industry attending these sessions.
The Transport Forum became the preferred platform in South Africa to discuss all issues relating to transport, providing insight into policy direction and allowing businesses to stay informed on new and upcoming industry developments. Thought leaders are given a monthly platform through the Transport Forum to engage with industries to debate matters of relevance and share knowledge and ideas. Role players included in the monthly special interest group sessions are all levels of government, state-owned enterprises, private business, industry management, regulatory bodies, research and academic institutions, as well as ICT solution providers.
In our industry, being able to make informed decisions is really, really important. So being in the frame of the latest information and understanding the latest market trends are really important to understanding the derived demand of shipping and logistics. With that in mind, the Transport Forum has been a valuable factor for our industry in terms of making informed decisions, and we look forward to attending and being a part of the future events as well.
My engagement with the Transport Forum is a great one. I think it's a game changer from our perspective. In terms of the networking that the Transport Forum has brought to us, it's been brilliant. In terms of the presentations, the content, the information that's been shared, it's never dull. It's delivered by professionals with plenty years of experience. So forever, when you're attending one of these Transport Forums events, it is a learning opportunity.
Collaboration and communication between these various stakeholders brings out superior solutions to create a more efficient and competitive transport sector.
But I guess the biggest benefit that we really get is the benefit that we get from Harry. Harry is passionate about transport in all its spheres, and he's a man that is really connected. So if I want an introduction to anybody, he really does make it happen. He's passionate about my business. And what makes it really important to understand is that he actually cares.
So with the information that one gets from the Transport Forum, you are able to share with those who do not have the opportunity to come and attend such forums. So in that regard, we do appreciate the sponsors, all the major sponsors that enable us small businesses to come and attend and get information with regard to all the opportunities that are available and what is planned through the transport and logistics sectors.
And I think many people in the transport industry who really care about transport and want to be in transport, whatever the case may be, and trade and various other subsectors of this, like road funding and so on, are part and parcel of the Transport Forum. It's a very broad thing, but it is focused on transport, and it is great for anybody who has a slightest interest in transport.
And I have really respected the way Harry works. I think the platform is organized in a very professional way and very interactive.
I have worked with Harry for I think the last 10 years in the Transport Forum. MCLI partnered with them, with the Transport Forum for many years for fantastic events down in Nelspruit, and I have really valued the chance to meet with people in the industry, and also it has been an incredible networking opportunity for me, both in my previous career and now launching my new business. It's a really important platform, I think, and there isn't another one quite like it in the country.
As the country as a whole, we need to know what is happening. We need to adjust. We need change management to take place. And this kind of forums makes the whole industry, the whole stakeholders of the industry to know what is happening in the world, what is happening. We need to adjust.
The Department of Transport and Supply Chain Management at the University of Johannesburg regards the Transport Forum as a vital link to industry for academia. It is a forum where industry experts discuss issues that are pertinent to the various subsectors within the industry, and this provides a platform for our students to be engaged with the industry activities and for academia to present their research findings to industry to inform practice and policy.
The Transport Forum invites you to join the special interest groups to engage and promote your business today using live streaming and in face-to-face networking. We further encourage you to promote your business through the Transport Forum Business Directory at a minimal annual fee where you will reach industry role players.